Chapter 562 /P. Xianyang City, Ning Family. No matter how desolate they were, they still retained their status as an aristocratic family. The Ning family's large mansion had an extraordinary aura, and because it had just been refurbished, it looked particularly dignified. But the front entrance was completely deserted, revealing a bit of a dejected atmosphere. When someone passed by the main entrance, they would lower their head and speed up their pace, as if they would be tainted by some terrible misfortune if they were even a bit slower. Several speed cars stopped outside the main entrance. Ning Yuntao gloomily got off. He looked around and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Then, he quickly walked in. When the Ning family first returned to the Holy Land, the courtyard had been lively for several days. But after they probed out the Ning family's current background, the excitement quickly faded away. Ning Ruffing was waiting in the study. Ning Yuntao ignored his exhaustion and hurried over to see him. When he walked in and stood in front of him, he revealed a look of shame. Although he had already expected this, Ning Ruffing couldn't help but feel disappointed upon seeing him like this. Then, an icy chill drilled into his bones. When the Ning family was flourishing in the early years, these people all had kind expressions on their faces, all of them rushing to get close to them. But now that the Ning family was in such a difficult situation, were they all going to kick them while they were down? In the end, they were still relatives, so why would they do this? Even though Ning Ruffing was a stubborn person, he didn't reveal a bitter expression. His eyes were filled with a bit of weariness and sadness. What did they say? Ning Yuntao revealed a look of resentment. Several families said the same thing. They said that in order to manage our family's businesses these past years, they had invested a great deal of capital into it, so they don't want to suffer this loss. As he looked at his father's bitter appearance, there were some words he didn't say. Ning Ruffing closed his eyes, hiding the pain in them. Even if his son tried to hide it, he had lived to this day and had seen many things, so he could guess what was going on. As he thought about how his eldest son was now neither man nor ghost, and how the Ning family had been forced into a dead end, his breathing quickened and his face paled. Ning Yuntao fell to his knees. It is all because I am useless. I can't support the Ning family's reputation, and father is already so old, yet I still have to worry about these things. He clenched his teeth. In the end, these businesses are still our Ning family's. Before, I only cared about the face of our relatives and didn't want this matter to blow up. But since they don't care about face, I will go all out and fight with them. Ning Ruffing opened his eyes, his expression severe. Fool! What kind of status did those people have? If they didn't have anyone backing them up, how could they be so presumptuous? If you lose your sense of propriety, you will only fall into someone else's trap. The Ning family is currently in a precarious situation. If something happens to you, this family will be finished. Ning Yuntao's face turned red and his lips trembled, but he didn't know what to say. The study fell into silence for a while. After a long time, it was Ning Ruffing who broke the silence. In the end, he was an old man who had lived for countless years. It was unknown what was going on in his heart, but he had already composed himself on the surface. Right now, the only way is to make a trip to East Sun City. As he spoke to her, he revealed a bit of hesitation. Increase the gift by 30%. Also, tell Ning Liang that she will follow us on our journey in several days. The meaning of these words caused Ning Yuntao's eyes to widen. He exclaimed softly, "Father." Ning Ruffing remained expressionless. I also love this girl, but she was born into the Ning family and it was the Ning family that raised her. At this time, if we need her to sacrifice herself, that is also her duty. Father, Ning Liang has been tormented by cold poison since she was a child. It hasn't been too long since she recovered. If father wishes to offer a gift to His Highness the Saint's son, why don't you choose someone else? Ning Yuntao clenched his teeth. My third daughter has an extremely good temperament and appearance. Ning Ruffing shook his head. There is no need to say anything more. Your father has already made up his mind. Ning Yuntao left in a daze. In the study, Ning Ruffing closed his eyes, tears rolling down his cheeks. A dignified noble family of the demonic path actually had to offer up their first daughter in exchange for the safety of their family. This was all because of his incompetence. Girl, don't blame me. Grandfather has no other choice. His whispers were bleak and desolate. Holy Land Small World, Sky Pivot Division. Elder Qing Ruhong rarely went into seclusion. She sat in an empty hall, her eyes empty. It was clear her mind had already left. But even if she was absent-minded, she still had the powerful senses of a calamity immortal. When space fluctuated, her eyes lit up like two bolts of lightning tearing through the darkness of the hall. Bang! A boundless aura instantly erupted, instantly suppressing the entire hall. With just a thought, a terrifying suppression could descend. Elder Qing, there is no need to be like this. I have no ill intentions. A gentle voice echoed out. Faint traces of darkness gathered in the hall, forming a figure that rapidly solidified. It was Mu Yunli. Qing Ruhong sat on her throne, her cold eyes not relaxing in the least because of his words. Mr. Mu, why have you come uninvited? Mu Yunli lightly said, I feel a bit of sorrow for Liang. It's fine if he died an innocent death, but the people of the world can't even feel the slightest bit of hatred towards him, much less take revenge for him. Gotcha! The floor of the hall instantly shattered. Countless cracks spread outwards like a spider web. Qing Ruhong stubbornly stared at Mu Yunli. How do you know his name? Mu Yunli had a calm expression. After living for so long, there will always be some hidden cards that others don't know about. Elder Qing, there is no need to pry too deeply into this. Liang was the name of the Endless Sea's great array spirit, and this name was given by Qing Ruhong. She looked at Mu Yunli and said, If Mr. Mu is mourning for my old friend, then I have already received your kind intentions. If there is nothing else, then forgive me for not seeing you off. Mu Yunli said, In the Endless Sea, there is indeed no absolute right or wrong. But, Elder Qing must admit that no matter what, it was Yao Bin who attacked and killed Liang. It is a pity that he has always scrupulously abided by his duty and never made the slightest mistake, but now he has fallen to such a fate. It is truly a pity. Qing Ruhong was expressionless. She looked at him without a word. Mu Yunli faintly smiled. It seems that I spoke too much. Since Elder Qing has already put down this matter, I won't disturb you any further. Farewell. He turned and stepped away, his figure vanishing from sight. Qing Ruhong furrowed her eyebrows. She was well aware that Mu Yunli had come here today with the intention of deliberately provoking them. But, she couldn't help but imagine the scene of her meeting Liang. Liang was a flesh and blood spirit, and it wasn't easy for him to be born. He was cautious and only hoped that one day he would be able to escape the imprisonment of the Great Array Formation and live freely in this world. They had discussed this for a long time and had already made some progress. Without accident, they would soon achieve their wish. But at this time, Yao Bin had rushed into the road of sea burial. In a daze, that beam of light that fell from the heavens appeared in front of her. It crashed into the endless sea, shocking everyone within the demonic path and also crushing away all of Liang's life force. Sometimes, reason couldn't completely control one's emotions. Qing Ruhong remained silent, a bit more obscurity in her eyes. Cloud Cluster City, Mu family. In an underground palace, Mu Yunli opened his eyes. After a moment of thought, he revealed a smile. He had already buried a seed of resentment in Qing Ruhong's heart. Perhaps it wouldn't grow, but as long as it took root and sprouted, it would be enough. Looking up at the dark hall in front of him, a bit of loathing flashed in Mu Yunli's eyes. He gently sighed. He never thought he would arrive at this step. But in this world, there was never a chance to choose again. Otherwise, a long, long time ago, he would rather. Shaking his head, Mu Yunli mocked himself inwardly. Perhaps he really was too old to think that his imagination would run wild. He gathered his thoughts and a sharp light shined in his eyes. Wasn't it about time he made his move? The Sky Core Division was responsible for all array formations in the Holy Land. Besides detection and supervision, daily patrols and maintenance were also important and complex links. Of course, depending on how important an array formation was, the person in charge had to pass different levels of tests. For instance, this array formation with beautiful demonic runes could be ranked in the top 3 of the Sky Core Division in terms of importance. Only the most trusted direct descendants of the Sky Core Division had the qualifications to enter. Although I've seen it many times, I still can't help but say that these demonic runes are far too beautiful. The baby-faced cultivator sighed. The dark-skinned cultivator next to him smiled. Isn't that right? I heard that the demonic runes used to set up this array formation were directly extracted from the body of a powerful demon beast. It isn't something that can be created by humans. His expression turned solemn. Although we've entered more than once, we still have to repeat the rules. Don't make the slightest mistake, otherwise not only will we be finished, but our families will also be implicated. As he finished speaking, his voice and expression were stern. Several people revealed dignified expressions. They nodded to express their understanding. The dark-skinned cultivator turned around and saw that the person behind him was a bit nervous. Afraid that he would make a mistake, he comforted him, "Brother-in-law, there is no need to be nervous. You and I are only going to enter the passage and will soon be done. Don't worry." The baby-faced cultivator laughed. Tianchang's temperament is the calmest. To see you so nervous today, your big brother and I didn't work together in vain to recommend you to enter. He winked and said, "Your eldest son is almost a month old, right? When we come back, we'll have a good feast. I didn't drink enough pear blossom wine last time." Tianchang let out a breath and smiled. "Good. The full moon feast will be carefully prepared. Big brother and all the other brothers must come to support us." Seeing him relax, the dark-skinned cultivator patted his shoulder and turned. "Let's go." The group stepped into the demonic runes. Black demonic light gushed out, swallowing up their figures. Their vision blurred for a moment, and when they recovered, they found themselves in an illusory passage that constantly twisted. Tianchang looked around. "Big brother, is this the passage to enter the demon realm?" The dark-skinned cultivator nodded. Without speaking, he took out the required testing equipment and led the others forward. Because this was the first time he had come here, he only planned to familiarize himself with the place and hadn't arranged any specific tasks. Tianchang smiled and stayed behind, letting the others go first. He followed behind, looking around. From time to time, he would reveal a look of praise, as if he were quite shocked by this. The passage was normal. 2 days later, they arrived at the end. If they continued forward, they would be halfway through. The pulling power of the demon realm wasn't something they could contend with. The dark-skinned cultivator relaxed. "Good. Once we complete the last test, we can call it a day. When we return, I'll treat everyone to a drink." Everyone cheered. Tianchang stopped. As he looked at the smiling crowd, a complex look appeared on his face, but it soon turned into an apologetic one. He lifted his hand and a red crystal appeared in his palm. As he looked at its pure and translucent surface, the faces of his wife and child seemed to appear. He took a deep breath and sighed inwardly. "In this life, I've let you two down. I hope I can make it up to you in my next life." Kacha, with a light sound, everyone froze. The dark-skinned cultivator turned around in astonishment. He looked at the shattered crystal in his brother-in-law's hand. Before he could say a single word, his field of vision was flooded by overwhelming blood-red flames. On this day, the channel to the demon realm collapsed and the Sky Hub division fell into chaos. Chapter 563 /P. The demon envoy rushed to the Sky Hub division as soon as possible. His complexion was dark and his eyes were cold. Elder Qing, how long will it take for the channel to be restored? Qing Ruhong lightly said, the channel has already collapsed and no one can enter. I can't make a complete estimate of the damage, but in my opinion, it is unlikely that the channel can be completely repaired. The demon envoy's complexion darkened. He looked at the chaotic Sky Hub division and suppressed the anger in his chest. Now was not the time to investigate who was responsible. Elder Qing, you should be well aware of the importance of the Demon World Channel. I hope that you can do your best. Qing Ruhong was silent for a moment. She nodded. Demon Envoy, rest assured that as the head of the Sky Hub division, I am duty-bound. The demon envoy cupped his hands together and hurried away. Looking at his back, a complicated expression appeared on Qing Ruohong's indifferent face. Her expression fluctuated for a long time before it finally turned into a sigh. The Demon World Channel was particularly important to the Holy Palace. Thus, besides the main transmission channel, there was also a backup channel left in the Holy Palace. Because of her status, Qing Ruhong was able to come into contact with this secret. If she were to speak of the destruction of the channel, it would instantly vanish. But, after hesitating for a long time, she chose to remain silent. Yao Bin wasn't wrong. Moreover, he was the Holy Palace's holy son and couldn't be offended, but how could a cold life dissipate in vain? The seed of resentment in her heart had already taken root. The previous demon envoy had a frosty complexion. He coldly said, after Bai Xinyuan's matter, the demonic path's 3 factions have already begun an internal investigation. How could there be a fish that slipped through the net? And Yang, you were too careless. The demon envoy bitterly smiled and bowed. Teacher, Bai Xinyuan's accident has caused the 3 factions to panic. The investigation began from the top to the bottom in order to prevent spies from taking risks out of desperation, so we didn't consider those at the bottom. Humph. The previous demon envoy didn't change his expression. He hesitated for a moment and said, can Qing Ruhong's words be trusted? The demon envoy furrowed his eyebrows. Perhaps teacher is worrying too much. Elder Qing has a proud temperament and shouldn't do anything that would harm the demonic path. This disciple believes in her. The previous demon envoy's complexion eased as he saw that he didn't lose his composure. I don't suspect that she played a role in this matter. With Qing Ruhong's status, destroying the Demon World Channel is far simpler than this. The demon envoy's thoughts stirred. Teacher, do you mean to say that it's about the restoration of the channel? The previous demon envoy was expressionless. Don't forget about the Endless Sea's great array spirit. This old man watched little Qing grow up. She may seem cold on the surface, but deep down she is a very loyal person. The demon envoy was solemn. This disciple understands. I will pay attention to this matter. The previous demon envoy closed his eyes. After several breaths of time, he coldly said, these past years, because the seat of the Holy Monarch has been vacant, the demonic path and the immortal sect have always been patient in their conflicts. It seems that they have forgotten that in terms of destruction and slaughter, we are far more skilled. Pass down the order. Have the shadows move and give the immortal sect a warning. Don't let them act too recklessly. Dongyang City. Due to the conferring ceremony of the Holy Sun, the already bustling city became even livelier. Cultivators in luxurious clothes walked back and forth on the long streets, and most of them had guards behind them. A considerable portion of them had followed their fathers and grandparents here to broaden their horizons. None of the young masters and young ladies, who usually lived like princes, were easy to deal with. In just several days, several battles had occurred in Dongyang City. Luckily, although these second-generation playboys were playboys, they weren't brainless. They didn't make a big deal out of things. In the current situation, causing trouble in Dongyang City was the same as losing face to His Highness the Holy Sun. However, there were exceptions, and some people were even doing this on purpose. For instance, on the long streets, Fang Chongling had bumped into someone from the Ning family. The juniors following behind him looked at the crowd and at a woman wearing a white veil. Although their faces were blurry, the beautiful aura that wafted out from her caused their eyes to brighten. "Old man Ning, we haven't seen each other for over a dozen days, so why do you look so haggard? There are some things that need to be accepted, so there is no need to waste your energy." Fang Chongling smiled as he spoke, his tone sincere. Ning Ruffing had no expression. "My body is very good and there is no need for Patriarch Fang to worry about me. I still have matters to attend to today, so I bid my farewells." He led his people away. Fang Chongling stepped to the side. "Meeting is fate, so there is no need for old man to reject me 1,000 miles away." His eyes fell on Ning Ruffing. "Is this niece Ning Liang? She is truly beautiful, I can't help but feel pity for her. I heard that the old man came to Dongyang City this time not only to pay respects to His Highness the Holy Sun, but also to find a husband for your niece. Old man, please take a look. Behind me are several of the most outstanding juniors of the Ning family. How about our two families form a marriage alliance so that we can support each other in the future?" Ning Rufing's complexion changed. He said, "Patriarch Fang, please be careful with your words. My granddaughter has no intention of looking for a husband. I appreciate Patriarch Fang's good intentions." Fang Chongling gasped. His complexion became strange. Could the rumors be true? The reason old man Ning brought his niece to Dongyang City is because he wants to offer her to His Highness. In the end, we are a noble family of the demonic path, so we need to preserve some face. If old man Ning were to deliver himself to our doorstep, I fear others would look down on his niece Ning Ling. Shut up. Ning Yuntao was enraged. His eyes looked as if he could eat someone alive. Fang Chongling, stop slandering us. Do you really think that our Ning family can only be bullied and humiliated by you? He could naturally see the sinister intentions of the Fang family. Today, they had brought up the topic of looking for a husband in front of everyone, first ruining Ning Ling's reputation. Then, they brought up the matter of offering her to His Highness. They wanted to cut off any path of survival for the Ning family. Looking at his silent niece and thinking about how calm she was after hearing the news, the anger in Ning Yuntao's chest burned even hotter and his eyes began to turn red. Fang Chongling's complexion darkened. Ning Yuntao, you aren't the Ning family patriarch yet and yet you dare to be so insolent. Do you want me to teach you what it means to respect your juniors? Behind him, the group of Fang family cultivators all had dangerous looks in their eyes. Several of them looked at Ning Liang without the slightest scruple. If there really was a conflict, they would find a chance to grope her body a few times to satisfy their cravings. Not only would this girl lose all face, but they would also want to see if the Ning family still had the courage to offer her to His Highness. The Fang family had already planned this. The Ning family patriarch had already been enraged. Just as a conflict was about to break out, a cold shout rang out, "All of you stop." The crowd of onlookers quickly dispersed and a group of true demon guards entered. The one leading them was Shang Yuntai. His indifferent eyes swept over the crowd. "The grand ceremony is approaching, so there must be no chaos in East Sun City. I hope everyone can restrain themselves, otherwise we will have to intervene. Fong Chongling secretly frowned. Everything had gone smoothly today, but he never expected the sudden arrival of the true demon guards would disrupt everything. They were subordinates of His Highness the Saint Sun, so they couldn't be offended. Without batting an eyelid, Fong Chongling looked at the steward beside him. The steward immediately put on a bright smile and bowed. This is all a misunderstanding. Our Shichong Fong family is old friends with Xianyang City's Ning family, so how could we possibly cause trouble? With a single sentence, the steward's identity was revealed. Anyone with some experience would understand. The steward's smile became even brighter and he calmly handed over a storage ring. Everyone, it has been hard on you all to patrol the city. Here is some money for wine. Use it to buy a few banquet tables. This is our Fong family's way of showing respect to His Highness the Saint Sun. These last words were very skillful. Even if he took benefits in front of everyone, he wouldn't be criticized by others. If it were anyone else, perhaps they would care about the reputation of a demonic path family and would choose to keep the peace. But Shang Yuntai had experienced the loss of his beloved, so he didn't have the slightest bit of goodwill towards these powerful families. Of course, the most important thing was that His Highness stood behind him. We follow His Highness the Saint Sun and will be provided for by His Highness. There is no need for you all to worry about us. Please leave immediately. The steward's smile froze on his face. Fong Chongling took a deep breath. Let's go. Although he was depressed, he knew in his heart that these true demon guards in front of him were people he couldn't provoke. Ning Ruffing hesitated for a moment. He didn't step forward to thank them. He nodded with gratitude and quickly left with his people. The storm was resolved. Seeing that there was no more excitement, the crowd began to disperse. However, many eyes fell on Shang Yuntai. From a servant to a master, looking at the style of these true demon guards, it seemed that His Highness the Saint Sun wasn't someone easy to fool. Everyone felt even more awe towards him. Big Brother Shang, Shichong's Fong family has been rising in prestige in recent years. I also know a few things about their grudges with the Ning family. This is a conflict between powerful families. If we interfere, I fear it will be a thankless task. A true demon guard whispered, worry in his eyes. Shang Yuntai lightly said, I know you have good intentions, but you should remember that since you and I are working for the true demon guards, our only master is His Highness. If you and I can't even complete His Highness' orders, then what use is there even if we are smooth and slick? Alright, let's continue our patrol. The true demon guards revealed looks of shame. They had been secretly complaining that Shang Yuntai shouldn't have interfered, but now they had all regained their composure. Now that the Holy Palace already had His Highness, if they continued to do things in such a muddle-headed manner, they feared they wouldn't be able to wear their armor for much longer. Thinking about it again, with His Highness supporting them, what did these demonic path families count for? Even if they offended them, would they dare to jump out and make things difficult for them? That was unless they were tired of living. Everyone's spirits rose. As they looked around, there was a bit more light in their eyes. Fong Chongling brought his people back to his courtyard in East Sun City. Although this was a newly bought courtyard that hadn't been decorated, it was still magnificent and magnificent. He thought that after he pledged his allegiance to His Highness the Saint Sun, some juniors would have to stay here and listen to his orders. This courtyard had been prepared for them in advance. But after what happened just now, Fong Chongling suddenly felt that his thoughts had been a bit too optimistic. His face darkened even more. In these past years, the Fong family had been smooth sailing. As the patriarch of the Fong family, when had he ever lost face? Even the extremely high-status elderly had been polite to him, but today he had been humiliated by several true demon guards. After sending everyone away, the steward hesitated for a moment. He said, "Sir, there is no need to be angry. The status of the true demon guards these past years has been quite awkward. Now that they have someone to rely on, it is inevitable that they will be a bit arrogant. What kind of person is His Highness the Saint's son? He will naturally understand that our Fong family has taken the initiative to pledge allegiance to His Highness the opportunity to gather the local forces. He will definitely be courteous to me to win people's hearts." Saying this, he sneered. "At that time, these true demon guards in front of me will be very careful and try to curry favor with me." Fong Chongling snorted and felt a lot more at ease. "Today is a great opportunity. I originally wanted to cut off the Ning family, but a few stinky bugs ruined my plan. In the future, I will not forgive them." Saying this, he slammed the table with hatred. The steward complimented him again. Fong Chongling smiled a bit more. He waved his hand and said, "Is the matter settled? Today, I have not finished all the work, so I can only act first. Everything is settled. We will be in front of the Ning family. After I pay my respects to His Highness the Saint's son, maybe those Ning family people won't even have the chance to enter the hall." Fong Chongling thought for a moment. "I originally wanted to see that old bastard Ning's appearance, but now that I think about it, it seems a bit inappropriate. Let's move the ranking up a bit. Otherwise, if His Highness wants to see the Ning family people on a whim, he might say something unpleasant and cause unnecessary trouble." The steward respectfully said, "It seems this sir has thought things through. I will immediately arrange it." On the third day, it was time to pay respects to His Highness. The Saint Palace's main doors were wide open, accommodating guests from all directions. The true demon guards were on the outside, and the sage nether guards were on the inside. The Ning family's gifts were generous, but they were currently in a precarious situation. In the rankings of the various demonic path families, they were ranked near the bottom. Ning Ruffing, Ning Yuntao, and Ning Liang brought several cultivators from their families with them. They stood in the vast crowd, a bit of worry on their faces. Although they didn't know what the Fong family's goal in coming to Eastern Sun City was, they didn't need to use their left knee to know that they didn't have good intentions. The conflict in the city that day was the best evidence. As everyone was silent, the greeting began. The first person to be invited into the hall was naturally the guest with the highest status. Although today was nominally a greeting to the master of the land, the truth was that many people with great backgrounds had come. Everyone listened carefully. The elders of the Saint Palace had sent congratulatory gifts, and even Blue Sky Yellow Springs had sent people to deliver gifts. After the incident with Bai Xin Yuan, Blue Sky Yellow Springs had maintained a very kind attitude towards Qin Yu. This was also one of the important reasons why everyone recognized Qin Yu's status. Ning Ruffing sighed inwardly. He had heard that His Highness was a new disciple of the demonic path. He was originally an unknown nobody, but who could have imagined that in less than 2 years he would have his current achievements? As the identities of the guests that came to congratulate him entered his ears, it was like thunder piercing his ears. If he had been related to any one of them, the Ning family wouldn't have fallen into such a difficult situation today. At this time, the uneasiness in Ning Rufing's heart about relying on His Highness the Saint's son had mostly dissipated. If he could really become a trusted aide of His Highness, then the future of the Ning family would be bright. His thoughts wandered even further. His Highness wasn't too old. If that girl Ning Liang could enter his eyes, then perhaps it would be a good marriage bestowed by the heavens. Thinking of this, the guilt in Ning Rufing's heart lessened by a bit. Suddenly, a loud and clear voice echoed out. "Shichang Fong family, enter the hall to pay respects to the Saint's son." Fong Chongling led several people forwards. As he passed by the Ning family, he turned his head and coldly sneered. This glance caused the entire Ning family to lose confidence. As they watched the Fong family leave, a bit more uneasy appeared on their faces. They followed behind the holy nether guard and entered the main hall. A dignified and solemn aura rushed towards them, as if an invisible mountain were pressing down on them. Fong Changling's complexion changed. He bowed even more and respectfully said, "Shi Chang Fong family's Fong Changling and his nephew greet Your Highness the Saint's son." "Greetings, Your Highness." It was no wonder that the several proud and arrogant people of the family had been so supportive of the Fong family's decision to rely on the Saint's son. Who would have thought that His Highness would have such a cultivation? This aura, even if it wasn't at the Calamity Immortal realm, it was likely close. "Peace, rise." A light voice echoed out from above. Although it was young, it was filled with dignity. Fong Changling respectfully stood up. He heard the voice continue to say, "Patriarch Fong is too kind. This solitude likes those 2 9-mark blood lotuses very much. Please sit." He hadn't wasted his energy to obtain the blood lotuses. Fong Changling looked at the envy in everyone's eyes and his spirits rose. "It's good that Your Highness likes them." Although the Shichang Fong family is newly established, everyone in the family abides by their status. In the future, if Your Highness has any orders, the Fong family will not hesitate to go through fire or water to fulfill them. For the head of an aristocratic family to say these words, it was a bit too blunt. There was a stir in the main hall. Many of the guests that had already paid their respects revealed looks of regret. Although everyone wanted to rely on His Highness, for better or worse, they still maintained their status. They thought that after today's grand ceremony, they would secretly reveal their intentions to His Highness. Who knew that the Fong family would play their cards against common sense? They didn't care about face at all. Although they were straightforward, they still took the lead. As the first aristocratic family to rely on His Highness, it could already be expected that they would receive preferential treatment in the future. Qin Yu's eyes flashed, but he wasn't surprised. With his current status in the demonic path, it was normal for aristocratic families of the demonic path to come to him. He just didn't think that the Fong family would be so impatient. Still, this was a good start. His tone relaxed a great deal. This solitude understands Patriarch Fong's intentions. If there is anything inappropriate in the future, this solitude will take responsibility for you. If the Fong family was willing to pledge allegiance to him, then Qin Yu didn't mind making a promise. The eyes in the main hall turned even hotter. If they had any killing power, then Fong Changling would likely have been burnt to ashes by now. Not to mention anything else, but with His Highness's words today, anyone that wanted to make things difficult for the Fong family in the future would have to think twice. Fong Changling was overjoyed. He respectfully bowed and led his people to the side of the main hall. A cultivator from the Holy Palace came forward to guide them. After they were seated, Fong Changling saw that the seats were only inferior to those of the honored guests. He was incomparably satisfied. The Ning family's stubborn resistance had actually helped the Fong family make the right choice. As Fong Changling thought of his family's prosperity, his smile became even brighter. No matter how envious everyone was, they didn't reveal anything on their faces. At this time, many people gathered around, their words full of flattery. Looking at Fong Changling's old chrysanthemum-like face, they all secretly warned themselves that in the future, it would be best if they didn't care about things like face. If they had realized this a long time ago, then the Fong family wouldn't even have existed. The surroundings suddenly quieted down. Fong Changling looked up and saw a woman with a cold temperament, as beautiful as a painting, walking towards him. Although he didn't know her identity, the 2 Saint Sun Palace maids following behind her were enough to prove her status. His thoughts raced and he quickly stood up. Hai Lon bowed. She lightly said, "Patriarch Fong, since you are willing to run errands for His Highness will not mistreat you." Is there a problem that requires His Highness's assistance? The meat show had arrived. Fong Chongling respectfully said, reporting to Miss, the Fong family is currently facing some difficulties. I ask that Miss pass on a message to His Highness. He immediately spoke of the grudge he had with the Ning family. The matter was still the same, but with a bit of embellishment. The Fong family was now surnamed Do. Seeing Hai Lanlan remain calm, Fong Chongling carefully said, right now, the Fong family is waiting outside the hall. I heard that they also want to enter His Highness's service. There was no need to speak too clearly, the meaning was clear. Hai Lanlan nodded. I understand Patriarch Fong's meaning. She stood up, bowed, and left. Several Fong family juniors looked at her slender back and couldn't help but gulp. It was only after Fong Chongling glared at them that they awkwardly looked away. Hai Lanlan furrowed her eyebrows, a bit of coldness in her eyes. As she thought about how the Fong family was the first family she had pledged loyalty to, she suppressed the loathing in her heart. Although she didn't have an official position right now, she was still temporarily managing the St. Palace's affairs. After asking around, she gained an approximate understanding of the grudge between the Fong family and the Ning family. Thinking for a moment, Hai Lanlan took advantage of a break in her worship to quietly approach Qin Yu. Your Highness, there are some matters in the Fong family that require your judgment. Qin Yu didn't care about the grudges between two noble families of the demonic path. But as he listened to her speak, he frowned. The Shichang Ning family. Hai Lanlan said, yes. I heard that the Ning family left the Holy Land a long time ago and just returned. What is their patriarch called? Ning Ruffing. It really was them. A strange light flashed in Qin Yu's eyes. What was this? Fong Chongling had run over here to falsely accuse his Dao companion's maiden family, who had borrowed the Fong family's dog Courage. Chapter 564. Hai Lanlan did not get a response. Your Highness. Qin Yu regained his composure. He narrowed his eyes. Go and investigate the current situation of the Ning family. Yes. Hai Lanlan took a few steps back, her eyes filled with surprise. Did His Highness have a relationship with the Ning family? Although she did not have a good impression of the Fong family, she still felt some pity for them. The evils we bring upon ourselves are the hardest to bear, that was probably what it meant. The entanglement between the Fong and Ning families wasn't some secret. After Hai Lanlan carefully asked several people, she was able to clearly understand the current situation of the Ning family. It wasn't too much to say that they were completely deserted by their own family. In the outside world, there were also several noble families of the demonic path led by the Fong family that had ill intentions towards them. However, since the Ning family and His Highness were old friends, and His Highness also valued them a lot when dealing with them, as long as they asked His Highness for help, all troubles would vanish like smoke in thin air. Why would it be so difficult? Hai Lanlan couldn't figure it out. Shaking her head, she suppressed her thoughts and imprinted the information into the jade scroll. Regardless of the reason why the Ning clan did not request for help, the predicament they faced after today would be easily resolved. In fact, it would even allow the entire clan to welcome a bright future. Qin Yu withdrew his divine sense from the jade slip. He maintained his composure, but his eyes turned a bit colder. When the events of Four Seasons City had caused an uproar, the Ning family had hurriedly returned to the Holy Land because they were worried that they would be punished by the immortal sect. Now that the Ning family was in such a situation, he couldn't shirk the responsibility. Guilt grew in Qin Yu's heart. After going through so much tempering and attaining his current cultivation and status, his mind was already sufficiently firm and wouldn't be easily affected by external affairs. But in the heart, there were always some soft spots, and Ning Ling was one of them. As Qin Yu thought about how there was no news of her in the immortal sept, he felt both anxious and resentful. If it weren't for the fact that he was weak, how could he not have been able to protect the person he loved? Although this thought was a bit unreasonable, it was what Qin Yu truly felt in his heart. In this state of mind, he valued the Ning family even more. Feng Chongling was courting death. If they wanted to protect the Ning family and improve their situation, today was the best opportunity. As long as they made their stance clear, no one would dare to have any ideas about the Ning family in the future. But this wasn't easy to do. No matter what, the Feng family was the first noble family of the demonic path to join his side. If he didn't have a good reason to deal with them, then he feared that other influences would be scared away. His thoughts raced and his eyes brightened. That was it. After carefully considering it several times and determining that there weren't any problems, Qin Yu suddenly said, "Pause for a moment." He swept his eyes around the hall. This solitude just heard that the Shichang Feng family and another noble family of the demonic path, the Xianyang Ning family, are in conflict. Feng Chongling's heart skipped a beat. Why did Her Highness suddenly mention these things? Secretly nervous, he hurriedly got up and walked out. It's just a small matter, Your Highness doesn't need to worry about it. Today is a joyous occasion, so don't ruin the mood of Your Highness and everyone else. Qin Yu said, the Feng family has been loyal and devoted to this solitude. Now that they have suffered grievances, how can this solitude sit idly by? His body leaned forwards. Patriarch Feng, tell us what happened and let the guests know. Today, I will uphold justice for you. Feng Chongling heaved a sigh of relief in his heart, and then he groaned bitterly in his heart. Some things were bound to be hidden in the shadows, and there was absolutely no reason to bring them out in the open. But looking at Qin Yu's solemn expression, it seemed as if thunder were brewing in his chest and he would definitely use it to win over the hearts of the people. If he refused to cooperate with Her Highness, then his favorable impression of him would likely be greatly reduced, and it would even increase the impression that he was disobedient. Feng Chongling clenched his teeth and steeled his heart. What was losing some face? As long as he could curry favor with Her Highness, the Feng family would still be able to walk unhindered within the demonic path in the future. With his thoughts settled, he revealed a sorrowful expression. I didn't want to make too much noise to begin with, but now that I think about it, it's really shameful. A wonderful story had just been born. It had even more explosive points than what Hai Lonlon had heard. It could be called a climax after climax, one that left those who heard it sad and those who saw it in tears. It was obvious that in this story, the Feng family had become the safe and secure victim. The hall was quiet. Countless eyes fell on Feng Chongling. Looking at his red eyes, his trembling fingers, the grief and indignation, the shame and helplessness in his eyes, they couldn't help but raise a thumbs up in their hearts. Everyone present knew a little about the matters between the Feng family and the Ning family. One didn't need to be a genius to know that they had seen the Ning family decline, so they had the thought of swallowing them whole. It was already difficult to lie with one's eyes wide open, much less speak in such a touching manner. Feng Chongling was truly a talent. Whether it was shamelessness or thickness, he far surpassed the average person. No wonder the Feng family was able to stand out from the crowd and occupy a place in His Highness the Saint's son's heart. There was a reason for this. Qin Yu's complexion darkened. He coldly said, Patriarch Feng, is what you say true? Feng Chongling was stunned. Of course it was false. But, his tone was resolute and decisive. I am not lying at all. I beg Your Highness to uphold justice for the Feng family. Now that he had laid the groundwork, he needed to hurry up and deal with the Ning family. Although his skin was thick enough, with so many eyes in the hall looking at him, it didn't feel good at all. How dare you? Qin Yu slapped the armrest of his throne. In this bright world, in the demonic path's holy land, there is actually someone so daring and arrogant as to use the name of a demonic path noble family. This is truly infuriating. Come, pass on this solitude's order. Summon the Ning family to the hall. This solitude wants them to confront Patriarch Fong face to face. Fong Chongling was stunned. There was something wrong with this script. How could the Ning family be summoned here? He panicked. He hurriedly said, "Your Highness, there is no need to." Qin Yu waved his hand, interrupting him. "Patriarch Fong, rest assured. Today, this solitude will have the Ning family bow their heads in apology in front of all the guests. You will be satisfied." Wrong, Your Highness, please stop messing around." Fong Chongling's eyes widened. Before he could say anything else, he heard a voice announce, "Your Highness, the Ning family has arrived." Qin Yu sat up straight. "Summon." The holy Nether Guard turned and shouted out loud. His helmet reflected the sunlight, splashing with a blurry blood-red light. "Your Highness has decreed that Xianyang City's Ning family requests an audience." Ning Ruffing lowered his head and entered the hall. As he felt the strange silence, he became increasingly nervous. He didn't know what was happening, but he didn't dare to look around and directly bowed. "Xianyang City's Ning family's Ning Ruffing greets Your Highness." Ning Yuntao and Ning Ling followed close behind and bowed. Their faces were a bit pale. How could Qin Yu accept their greetings? He lightly coughed and said, "Rise." He lifted a hand and pointed a finger. "The Patriarch of Xichang's Fong family has come to sue your Ning family for abusing their power to bully others. Does Patriarch Ning have anything to say?" Ning Rufing's face flushed red with anger. "Your Highness, please do not listen to the words of lowly people. Xichang's Fong family is distorting the truth and there isn't a single bit of truth in their words." Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. "The Ning family means that the Fong family is falsely accusing you. Do you have any evidence?" Ning Ruffing took a deep breath. "Your Highness, the Ning family has been in decline for many years and we just returned to our fiefdom not too long ago. How could we have the spare strength to provoke the illustrious Fong family? The truth is that there are some lowly people who saw the Ning family fall from grace and wanted to encroach on my family's property and fiefdom. The reason I came to pay my respects to Your Highness today was because I hoped that Your Highness could uphold justice for me. I never thought that there would be lowly people who would maliciously slander me." He fell to his knees. "Your Highness, the specifics of this matter are not a secret. We will know if it is true or false once we investigate it. I implore Your Highness to give my Ning family justice." In the hall, as everyone looked at Fong Chongling's shame and indignation, they all felt happy. That surname Fong had allowed you to show off, but now you're out of luck. However, they couldn't figure out what His Highness meant by this. Since he had taken in the Fong family, why did he have to embarrass them? Could it be that His Highness wanted to tell them that as long as they were his subordinates, he would protect them no matter what? Although this was what everyone was hoping for, how could such a thing be placed on the table? His Highness Saint Sun's actions were a bit too ugly. Thinking like this, many people began to look down on him. They thought that he really came from a humble background. Even if he had a respected status now, he had still lost the demeanor of a noble family. The pitiful Ning family still hadn't figured this out. No matter how angry they were, what could they do? In this world, the weak had no right to speak. The more they struggled now, the more miserable their final result would be. Looking at that Ning family girl with her head lowered, her appearance, temperament, and figure were all top-notch. TSK, what a pity, what a pity. Fong Chongling clenched his teeth, wishing he could rip off Ning Rufing's mouth. But thinking about it, so what if they said anything? Would His Highness even care? As for the three Ning family members, they were like clowns on stage. Their fates had already been decided, but they still didn't know it. He coldly sneered, "Ning Ruffing, no matter how glib your tongue is, justice is in the hearts of the people. His Highness's eyes are like torches, how could he allow you to wantonly quibble?" He turned and bowed. "Your Highness, you have seen it for yourself. The Ning family still hasn't shown any repentance. We cannot forgive them so easily." Ning Yuntao's anger attacked his heart. "Fong Chongling, you despicable villain." The hall was incomparably quiet, making his voice particularly grating. Looking at everyone's expressionless faces and the faint regret in their eyes, Ning Yuntao suddenly regained his composure. His body shook and endless sorrow rose in his heart. He looked up, his voice filled with pain and despair. "Your Highness, you are the Highness of the Holy Palace. How could you, not distinguish between right and wrong? My Ning family has been loyal to the demonic path for generations, but in the end we have fallen to such a state. I refuse to accept this, I refuse to accept this." Paw, with a resounding slap, Ning Yuntao fell to the ground. Ning Rufing's hands trembled and he shouted, "Shut up. Just what sort of honored status does His Highness have? How dare you offend him?" He fell to his knees. "I ask His Highness to be magnanimous and not lower yourself to the same level as this idiot. The Ning family is willing to accept any judgment." "Grandfather." Ning Liang looked up for the first time. Her eyes widened with disbelief. But what she saw was Ning Rufing's increasingly old face and the pain in his eyes. She suddenly understood that her grandfather's submission was only because he wanted to preserve the lives of the Ning family. The indifferent gazes around her caused Ning Liang's entire body to turn icy cold. She bit her lips and looked at the highest seat of the hall, at the Holy Sun. Was this the person who would inherit the throne of the Holy Monarch? Was the Holy Palace blind? At first glance, the first thing that entered her eyes was an unfamiliar face. It was extremely handsome, and there was a hint of immaturity amidst the ordinariness. But for some unknown reason, Ning Liang's heart skipped a beat. She felt a bit of familiarity, as if she had seen this face somewhere before. Then, as she saw those eyes, Ning Liang stiffened. Shock and astonishment appeared in her eyes that were filled with anger. Those eyes, in that instant, her thoughts raced. The figure that she had been suppressing in her heart suddenly leapt into her mind. Two completely different faces, one ordinary and the other handsome. No one would ever compare them to each other. But now, in Ning Liang's mind, the nose, the eyes, the eyebrows, they were clearly different, but the two faces gradually overlapped. Qin Yu cursed inwardly. He never thought that his current appearance would be recognized. He didn't want to reveal his true identity right now. He said in a low voice, "Patriarch Ning, rest assured that this solitude will not punish you because of a moment of anger. It is just that this matter hasn't been investigated yet and Patriarch Ning has already admitted his guilt on his own initiative." Something didn't seem right about this. The people in the hall all revealed looks of surprise. Just what sort of routine was His Highness playing? How come they didn't understand? Ning Ruffing was stunned for a moment. Then, a thought appeared in his mind and his heart raced. He only hesitated for a tenth of a breath before he clenched his fists. This was his final chance. Even if there was only a slight chance, he had to give it his all. Ning Ruffing fell to his knees and kowtowed. "I was confused. I thank Your Highness for your magnanimity and for not blaming me. I am willing to use my life as a guarantee that everything I said before was true. Everything I said before was the Fong family's malicious slander. I ask that Your Highness investigate this clearly." Fong Chongling was both shocked and angry. Just as the curtain was about to fall, he never imagined that the tempo would suddenly change. As he heard Ning Rufing's words, his heart shrank. His lips moved, but before he could speak, he heard a deep and low voice from above the hole. "Patriarch Fong, do you dare to guarantee your words?" Something was wrong, something was wrong. No matter how slow his reaction was, he could still sense it. A cold sweat dripped down Fong Changling's forehead. He looked up and saw Qin Yu's icy cold eyes. His heart shivered. If he continued to be stubborn, he might lose his life. But if he changed his words, as he was struggling with his thoughts, he heard Qin Yu happily say, "It seems that Patriarch Fong has tacitly agreed." This solitude knew that someone as sincere as Patriarch Fong would not be a devious or evil person. Fong Changling looked at Qin Yu's gentle expression and was a bit confused. Was it just an illusion just now? Did His Highness still stand on his side? In a daze, he subconsciously nodded and agreed to this point. Success. Qin Yu sneered inwardly. He stood up and looked around the hall. His eyes didn't contain the least bit of emotion, but they were filled with a formidable oppressive pressure. This solitude is in a high position and has always been nervous. What I fear the most is being deceived by others and doing something wrong. I hope that everyone can truthfully answer this solitude's questions. He paused for a moment. The matter between the Fong and Ning families is not a secret. As for the truth, who can tell this solitude? The hall fell deathly silent, without a single sound. Everyone's eyes widened, feeling as if their brains weren't enough to process this. Did this mean that His Highness wanted to deal with the Fong family? But that wasn't right. His Highness was in need of people. Was it worth it for the sake of a declining Ning family? Let alone justice, anyone that could reach such a high position in this world had a heart of stone. Good people would have long since died. Since they couldn't guess Qin Yu's thoughts, no one dared to speak. Time slowly passed. The silence was the same as before. Qin Yu lightly said, "What? Does no one know?" Between his eyebrows, there was a bit of ridicule. In the lower left seat, a youth suddenly flushed red. He wasn't convinced by this newly ascended saint's son to begin with, and he was already impatient to be arranged to congratulate him. How could he withstand this ridicule? Humph. This isn't a secret at all. It's just that everyone cares about His Highness Saint Sun's face and doesn't want to talk about it. The complexion of the blue sky Yellow Springs cultivator changed. He pulled on the youth's sleeves, his face stiffening and revealing a bit of regret. Qin Yu's eyes were indifferent. This solitude wishes to hear the details. What he couldn't stand the most was this sort of pretentious and indifferent tone. What was there to be proud about? It was just good talent and luck. The youth's complexion darkened. In truth, it's very simple. A single sentence is enough. He lifted a hand and pointed, "This person isn't telling the truth at all." Fong Changling's face instantly paled. Qin Yu shook his head. The words of one family cannot be trusted. Everyone, please say something. Between the Fong and Ning families, who is lying? The youth felt that he wasn't trusted and his face paled. He ruthlessly glared at Qin Yu and stood up. "Mr. Wei, we mentioned this a few days ago. Have you forgotten?" The person called Mr. Wei had an embarrassed expression. But the youth's status was too high, so he could only grumble inwardly. He coughed and said, "According to what I know, what young Master Langya said is correct. If he didn't trample on the Fong family, then he would have to offend the Langya bloodline. Was there even a need to choose?" Qin Yu frowned. "If it's just the two of you, that doesn't seem enough." The youth thought that Qin Yu wanted to establish his authority and protect the Fong family. He was enraged. "Everyone, Mr. Wei and I have already spoken. Do you still want to remain silent?" Or do you think that I have lied to Mr. Wei? His last words were filled with killing intent. No one could sit still. Cough. In truth, I have also heard of this. It seems that the Fong family is in the wrong. That is true. The Fong family is in the wrong. It is probably the Fong family's problem. Fong Chongling began to sweat profusely. The youth turned around. Your Highness, the facts are before you. Since you understand, please make a judgment. In this situation, he wanted to see how this saint's son would end things. Qin Yu was silent for a moment. Fong Chongling, what explanation do you have for this? Fong Chongling fell to his knees. Your Highness, the Fong family has been wrongly accused. But he couldn't say the rest. The Fong family had been wrongly accused. Didn't that mean that everyone in the hall was slandering them? If they offended a sea of people, wouldn't they be able to live with this in the future? His face flushed red. He could only kowtow and shout, Your Highness, please investigate this matter clearly. Investigate, this solitude should indeed investigate this matter clearly. Just who gave you the courage to openly persecute a demonic path noble family in a small world of the demonic path? Qin Yu's eyes were as sharp as blades, chilling to the bone. Although this solitude hasn't been the saint's son for long, I am well aware of how difficult it is to become a noble family of the demonic path. He lifted a hand and pointed. Dongting's Shang family. 47 ancestors fought to the death without retreating, defending the territory of the demonic path. Their family only has women and children left over. Only then did they obtain the title of a noble family. He pointed again. East Flowers Chin family. They have raised demon beasts for generations. Because of the dangers, there are very few people in their family who live long lives, regardless of whether they are men or women. After 6 generations of blood and tears, they were finally granted a title by the demonic path. Huiwei's Xiao family. They traversed the entire land of divinity and demons, searching for ancient ruins. Clearcloud's Nangong bloodline, 7 families were mentioned. All of them were in the hole. As they thought of how much their ancestors had sacrificed for their family's name, their hearts surged and their eyes turned red. As they looked at the Fong family, their eyes became especially cold. Thanks to Hai Lon Lon, Qin Yu had recorded down all the important figures that had come to congratulate them. In particular, he had made detailed preparations against the background information of these noble families. Only then was he able to come up with this divine plan. Qin Yu's complexion darkened. So, this solitude is really curious. Just who gave you the courage to recklessly persecute the Ning family? Men, drag Fong Chongling away and immediately execute him. Fong Chongling's eyes were filled with despair. As he looked at the holy nether guard rushing towards him, his mind buzzed. Even now, he didn't know why the situation had reached this point. When he was caught, his body tensed up. But in the next moment, he slumped back down. If he dared to resist, the Fong family would be thoroughly finished. Qin Yu sneered inwardly. Fong Chongling was quite smart, otherwise he wouldn't have minded using the entire Fong family as an example. Tao looked around the hall, his voice loud and clear. Everyone in the demonic path must remember that the dignity of noble families cannot be violated. In the future, if something similar happens to the Fong family, no matter who it is, this solitude will not be lenient. At this moment, the cultivators of the demonic path's noble families felt their hearts surge like the sea. They were so excited that tears filled their eyes. Without needing any guidance, they all fell to their knees, praising His Highness for his wisdom. Their thoughts of seeking refuge no longer wavered. Today, Qin Yu had won the hearts of everyone. In the seat on the left, the Blue Sky Yellow Springs cultivator looked at his young master who still had a confused look on his face. He sighed inwardly. The disparity between them wasn't normal at all. His eyes fell on Chinyu, a bit more cautious. When he returned, he would tell the lords that His Highness could not be underestimated. Chapter 565. As the Saint Sun's grand ceremony passed, the flow of people in Eastern Sun City lessened. But, news of this rapidly spread as the guests left. The Fong family had lost a family head and lost all face. They had become a card in the hands of the Saint Sun, exchanging for the loyalty of the various demonic path noble families. This sort of method was so fierce that anyone could only praise it as fierce. In addition, what attracted the most attention was the Ning family. A demonic path family that had already fallen into decline had actually overturned the prestigious Fong family. How could people not be amazed? And what was even more amazing was that the woman that the Ning family wanted to offer to His Highness was actually staying in the Saint Palace. This was especially important. His Highness's rise was astonishing and he didn't give anyone a chance to win him over. Now, he didn't even have a single woman close to him. As for that woman from the Ning family, it was said that whether it was in terms of appearance or figure, she was top class. One couldn't help but wonder. If Ning Liang was able to rise to the top, she would be the most honored woman in the demonic path. The entire Ning family would benefit from this. Qin Yu ordered Ning Liang to stay in the palace, but he didn't make any specific arrangements. Hai Lanlan thought about it again and gave her the status of a palace official. Although this wasn't a high position, the Saint Palace had just been established and the staffing was simple. Including Hai Lanlan, there were only 3 female officials. And because of their status, besides His Highness himself, no one else had the qualifications to order them around. As the rumors spread in the outside world, the people in the palace looked at Ning Liang with envy and awe in their eyes. Even the other 2 female officials were polite to her. Hai Lanlan saw all of this, but her heart was calm. This was because she believed that His Highness keeping Ning Liang here had nothing to do with the matters between a man and a woman. But, she was also a bit curious. Just what was the relationship between the Ning family and His Highness? Otherwise, with His Highness's status, why would he favor the Ning family so much? That's right, it was support. If Qin Yu kept Ning Liang in the palace, then even if he didn't say anything, no one in the demonic path would dare provoke the Ning family. But because she had limited information, Hai Lanlan could only see half of it. It was true that Qin Yu supported the Ning family, but the other reason was that he didn't want Ning Liang to reveal his identity. In the Grand Hall, although they had only exchanged glances, Qin Yu knew that this girl had likely recognized him. After Zhao Qinyuan left with the 9-mark blood lotus and bid his farewells in satisfaction, Qin Yu thought for 2 days and decided to see her. After receiving the summons from His Highness, Ning Liang's eyes brightened. Her heart surged with emotions and she didn't notice the envy in the maid's eyes. "Auntie, please follow me." Qin Yu looked at Ning Liang, whose appearance and temperament were increasingly similar to Ning Ling's. His eyes were dazed for a moment and he fell silent. After a few breaths, he coughed lightly and said, "Get up." Ning Liang looked up at the strange yet familiar face. Her lips moved but she didn't speak. Qin Yu smiled. He touched his face and said, "I originally thought that no one would see through this face of mine, but who would have thought that it would break apart in front of a little girl like you? I'm really curious as to how you did it." Ning Liang's eyes widened. She never thought that Qin Yu would directly admit to it. To change his appearance and name to enter the demonic path, he must have his own difficulties. Thinking about his current status, if others were to discover it, her heart tightened. She quickly said, "Your Highness, don't worry, I will not tell anyone." She suddenly felt a bit afraid. Power and status could distort a person's mind. Was the Qin Yu of today still the same person from Four Seasons City? In order to keep it a secret, would he? Qin Yu immediately saw through Ning Liang's thoughts. He bitterly smiled and shook his head. What nonsense are you thinking about? If I really wanted to silence them, would it be so complicated? He hesitated for a moment. But, regarding my identity, I do need to keep it a secret. Be careful when you sleep in the future and don't let anything slip out in your dreams. Ning Liang covered her mouth and shook her head. Her actions left Qin Yu stunned for a moment before he began to laugh. His laughter caused Ning Liang to blush. She wasn't normally like this, so how could she not be able to help but act like a fool in front of His Highness? But, she was actually happy in her heart. This was because she discovered that His Highness seemed to be much closer to her than he was in Four Seasons City. After a moment of hesitation, she quietly said, Your Highness, can you tell me why you helped the Ning family again and again? Qin Yu's smile froze. He frowned, not speaking. Ning Liang knew that she had said the wrong thing. Your Highness, just pretend I didn't ask. I was just curious. I'm sorry, Qin Yu took a deep breath and smiled. It's fine. In the future, you don't need to be too cautious in front of me. As for your question, I can't tell you for now. Let's talk about it later. After speaking a few more words with Ning Liang, someone came over to see him. He had her leave first. After dealing with the matters at hand, Qin Yu leaned back in his chair. He closed his eyes, a look of exhaustion on his face. Ever since he entered the land of divinity and demons, he had been working hard to change his destiny and make himself stronger. In the eyes of outsiders, Qin Yu was infinitely glorious, but how could they know just how difficult his struggles were? He had lost count of how many times he had been careless and turned into a skeleton. But soon, Qin Yu let out a deep breath and his expression became firm once more. All of his weariness and gloom were swept away and his aura became stronger once more. He had already arrived at this step. In the future, he would surely be able to control the Holy Palace. At that time, looking at the entire world, he would have the qualifications to play games. Ning Liang, wait for me. Immortal Sect, 9 Heaven Mirror Moon Palace. Several palace maids carried flower baskets in their hands, docilely following behind a person as they quietly walked down the white jade road. Within the baskets were freshly picked mystic crystal lotuses. They were pure white without the least bit of impurities and each petal seemed as if they were carved from ancient ice, emitting a faint chill. Recently, the palace master had gone into seclusion and needed to consume a massive amount of mystic crystal lotuses every day. Because these spirit plants couldn't be picked and stored ahead of time, there were special maids responsible for picking them every day. The first palace maid to the left had a respectful and obedient expression on her face. She was an old servant of the palace and it was only because of this that she was able to stand out from the many competitors and obtain the chance to approach the palace master. Although this wasn't the first time she had seen that figure in the ice pond, the palace maid was still stunned. Her eyes revealed a bit of confusion, but she soon regained her composure. She sighed inwardly. This was truly a person so beautiful that even women couldn't help but be infatuated with him. And this was in a blurry state with rising cold energy. If she could clearly see him, she had no idea just how enchanting he would be. Unfortunately, such a beautiful woman was actually one of the Immortal Sect's 3 giants. No matter how close he was to her, he could only say sorry. After the last basket of mystic crystal lotuses was poured into the ice pond, the palace maid laid down the basket and gently sighed. The beautiful figure in the ice pond seemed to sense something and suddenly opened her eyes. Their gazes met and the palace maid revealed a happy expression. This was the first time she had seen the palace master's eyes. They were truly beautiful, like the pure sky without the least bit of impurities. To be able to see such beautiful eyes at the end of her life, she had no regrets. The palace maid stood up and respectfully bowed towards the ice pond. The other palace maids beside her all revealed panicked expressions. In the next moment, a heaven-shaking explosion interrupted their thoughts. A terrifying strength swept out, wrapping around them and tearing them to pieces. In that instant, the smell of blood flooded their noses and mouths. Shen Yuanyin lifted her hand, revealing her jade-like arm. She gently grasped it in front of her and the impact of the explosion stopped, unable to approach at all. But she frowned. She looked down at the ice pond and saw that atop a pure white mystic crystal lotus, there was a blood-red ghost face that grinned. Puff! Shen Yuanyin spat out a mouthful of blood. Purple Moon just happened to arrive at this time. As she saw this, her pupils shrank and her face paled. Within the ice pond, the condensed runes quietly shattered and the mystic crystal lotuses withered away. Shen Yuanyin flew out from the ice pond. She lifted her hand and white clothes appeared from thin air, wrapping around her perfect body. She wiped away the blood from the corners of her lips and lowered her head. "Honorable Master, I'm fine." Purple Moon shivered. Fine? How could she be fine? After reaching large success of the Sublime Lost Emotion Code, one had to reach a level where one's body was as transparent as glass. Only then would they be able to withstand the power of forgetting emotion, otherwise their soul would rapidly wither away and they would die. This was the only flaw of the Sublime Lost Emotion Code and also the greatest secret of Nine Heaven Mirror Moon Palace. Not even the lucid Nether Realm or the Buddhist kingdom knew of this. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, she didn't dare to pay too much attention to Shen Yuanin's seclusion. But who would have thought that at the critical moment of success, a mistake would occur? That palace maid who died with a satisfied heart would never have imagined that she had only wanted to give the immortal sect a warning, but she had actually harvested a giant Easter egg that had nearly destroyed one of the three giants. Purple Moon screamed, "Demonic path! Demonic path!" She had also seen the ghost face on the black crystal lotus. The rebirth curse of the blue sky yellow springs couldn't be wrong. Shen Yuanyin had an indifferent expression, as if the one who had suffered a great setback and whose life was in danger wasn't her. "Honorable Master, rest assured that I won't die. This matter couldn't be made public." Purple Moon took a deep breath, but her eyes were still filled with a cold light. Shen Yuanyin lowered her head, not revealing any emotion at all. No one would have guessed that what she was thinking about right now was the smile on that palace maid's face before she died. Death was the only terror in the world, so why would she smile? As Nine Heaven Mirror Moon Palace was tense on the inside and tense on the outside, Ning Liang also encountered trouble. She had received a notice to deal with some palace affairs, but after she entered the main hall, she didn't see a single person. When she turned around, the maid who led the way had already disappeared. Her heart tightened. Ning Liang turned to leave, but the hall doors had already closed. Everything in front of her turned dark, as if she had fallen into eternal night. The darkness submerged her like a tide, placing a powerful imprisonment on her. A deep and low voice sounded out in her mind, "Ning Liang, where did you meet His Highness?" The panic-stricken Ning Liang's eyes widened. She struggled with all her might, but all of her efforts were in vain. "Ning Liang, where did you meet His Highness?" The voice sounded out once more. It was low and light. "Ning Liang, where did you meet His Highness?" The voice was even lower and gentler. Ning Liang's struggling movements gradually slowed down and her eyes began to glaze over. She tried to open her eyes wide, but she couldn't help but slowly close them. She was so tired. If she closed her eyes and slept, it would definitely be very, very sweet. The moment before her consciousness faded away, Ning Liang froze. In the next moment, her eyes widened as if she were in pain. Her black and white eyes instantly turned bloodshot. She opened her mouth to cry out, but all her strength seemed to be sucked out and she couldn't make a single sound. The voice in her mind paused for a moment before continuing. Where did you meet His Highness? Where did you meet His Highness? Where did you meet His Highness? It was no longer gentle, but rather louder and louder, like rumbling thunder that wanted to shatter one's mind. Ning Liang's body twitched. She had already bitten through her lips. Her blood was slightly salty and hot, but she persisted in her final moments of clarity. Someone wanted to harm His Highness. She could not be controlled, she could not be controlled. Her consciousness was like grass in a torrential downpour. Every breath of time seemed to twist and stretch out endlessly, becoming especially long. Ning Liang thought of committing suicide. But to her dismay, she discovered that she couldn't even die. In her daze, a voice suddenly sounded out. Stop, let her go, it was His Highness. In the next moment, Ning Liang's consciousness fell into darkness. After an unknown period of time, Ning Liang opened her eyes once more. As she saw Qin Yu's concerned expression, her eyes ached and tears tumbled down. Her body was still sore and weak. She couldn't lift a hand to wipe away her tears. Qin Yu was filled with guilt. He reached out a hand and wiped away the tears. He comforted her, it's fine. Don't worry. Ning Liang regained her composure. She hurriedly said, Your Highness, someone wants to harm you. Qin Yu nodded. I've already dealt with it. Don't think too much about it. Eat some pills and rest early. Seeing his calm expression, Ning Liang relaxed. A wave of exhaustion washed over her once more. She forcefully swallowed some pills and fell into a deep sleep. Looking at her pale face, Qin Yu felt a bit of self-blame. If he had thought of this earlier, this girl wouldn't have suffered so much. Letting out a light breath, Qin Yu walked out of the room. He looked at the demon envoy across from him, his complexion gloomy. Don't let something like this happen again. His voice was calm, but the demon envoy sighed inwardly. After learning of this matter, not much of the favorable impression he had of Qin Yu remained. My apologies, Your Highness' status is too high, so I have no choice but to be cautious. I have already handed down punishment for the person who did this. He will never appear in front of Your Highness again. Although Qin Yu knew that the demon envoy had his own difficulties, his complexion didn't soften. He needed the demon envoy to remember this matter. Lord Demon Envoy is busy. Now that my identity has been confirmed, why bother making another trip? The demon envoy sighed. I came here today because there is something I need to discuss with Your Highness. Seeing the demon envoy furrow his eyebrows in a dignified manner, Qin Yu nodded. Follow me. After entering the grand hall, the demon envoy dismissed everyone and went straight to the point. When Your Highness was in the Endless Sea, I was already preparing to obtain Calamity Immortal Realm Demon Blood. But not too long ago, there was an accident at the Sky Core Division and the channel that connects to the demon world was destroyed. There is no way to rebuild it in a short period of time. His tone was heavy. Past Saint Monarchs have mostly cut down Calamity Immortal Realm Demon Beasts of the demon world in order to form a Saint Step demon body. But now, this road is no longer possible. Qin Yu frowned. Does the demon envoy mean that I won't be able to form a Saint Step demon body in a short period of time? The demon body cultivation dreaded bottlenecks the most. If one was trapped in the Emperor realm for too long, then even if they obtained demon blood in the future, their chances of making a breakthrough would be greatly reduced. As he thought of this possibility, his complexion paled. No, could it be that the demon envoy had personally come here to tell him this bad news when he was in a bad mood? Thinking of this, Qin Yu looked up. The demon envoy smiled. Your Highness is truly smart. There will be a chance soon. If Your Highness can grasp it, you will immediately be able to form a saint-step demon body. Qin Yu nodded, indicating for the demon envoy to continue. Calamity Immortal Realm demon beasts are unable to adapt to the rules of the land of divinity and demons, thus it is difficult for them to exist in this world. But this isn't something that can be decided. In the depths of the Chu Empire's Sea of Purgatory, there is a Calamity Immortal demon beast, a water demon. This beast is cruel and savage by nature and has the supernatural ability to transform into a myriad of forms. Although it is difficult to hunt it down, as long as preparations are made ahead of time, then with your highness's cultivation you might have a chance. Sea of Purgatory. After becoming the demonic path saint's son, Qin Yu now had the qualifications to come into contact with the vast majority of the world's secrets. After thinking for a moment, he found information about the Sea of Purgatory and immediately frowned. The Sea of Purgatory is a forbidden land of the Chu Empire and is one with the Great Array Formation of the imperial capital. If the array formation isn't opened, no one can enter or leave. Even the water demon cannot approach. Lord Demon Envoy, are you joking with me? The Demon Envoy lightly said, 2 months from now, the Chu Empire will be welcoming its 30-million-year founding ceremony. The demonic path will send envoys to congratulate them. According to convention, during the 10-million-year celebration, the Chu Empire will open the Sea of Purgatory and allow all cultivators below the Calamity Immortal Realm to enter. They can use their own methods to find lucky chances in return. His eyes were sharp. This is your highness's chance. In the land of divinity and demons, there were 2 transcendent powers, the Immortal Sept and the Demonic Path. Beneath them were 7 great empires that divided up endless territories. Each of them ruled over a region and each had an unfathomably deep background. If these 7 empires were ranked, then the Great Chu would be ranked first. No one would have any objections. 30 million years after the Chu Empire was founded, powerhouses had emerged from the Great Chu Empire's imperial family, and there were even several great emperors who possessed great talent and strategies. Over the endless years, they had swallowed up countless countries and constantly expanded their territory. Now, their territory was vast, occupying nearly 1/5 of the entire land of divinity and demons. They were a true super-empire. Just this point alone was enough for the Chu Empire to be ranked first among the 7 empires. Moreover, the Chu Empire's imperial family had their own inheritances. Every great emperor had a terrifying cultivation at least at the 4th level of Calamity Immortal Realm, and they also had the destiny of the country supporting them. It was enough for them to look down on all others. Qin and Xiao were close to the demonic path, Yan and Qi followed the immortal sect's lead, and Wei and Han huddled together, swaying left and right. Only the Chu Empire was able to stand on equal footing with the immortal and demonic paths. It was because of this that the Great Chu Empire's 30-million-year anniversary celebration became a grand event in the entire land of divinity and demons. As long as there were influences that had the qualifications to do so, they would prepare generous gifts to congratulate them. Of course, part of this was because the Sea of Purgatory was about to open. The Chu Empire's Sea of Purgatory was rumored to have gathered 1/3 of the world's earth veins. It was a transcendent treasure land, and the Chu Empire's capital was built by borrowing the strength of this place. Because the Sea of Purgatory was unknown, after the first great Chu Emperor established the capital, he sealed off the sea within capital's Great Array Formation. Afterwards, the number of times it was opened could be counted on one hand. But every time it was opened, there would be great lucky chances born. Many powerhouses that shook the land of divinity and demons were born, thus the Sea of Purgatory's reputation became increasingly resounding. Now that the Chu Empire's 30-million-year anniversary celebration was over, the Sea of Purgatory was destined to open. As long as there was a chance, who would be willing to miss out on it? It was true that the Sea of Purgatory was extremely dangerous, but wealth came from danger. In this world, there was no such thing as a meat pie falling from the sky. For a time, the land of divinity and demons was in turmoil. Immortal sect. It was unknown what reason Purple Moon used to convince the Nether Domain Master and Buddhist sovereign, but they agreed to allow Shin Yuanyin to hide her identity and follow the messenger to Ing capital. Palace Master, there is a beast in the Sea of Purgatory called a water demon. Its life treasure is the Jade Soul Ice Heart. No matter what, you must obtain it, otherwise, Shin Yuanyin had a faint expression. Honorable Master, rest assured that I will slay the water demon and obtain the Jade Soul Ice Heart. She turned and stepped out, vanishing without a trace. Purple Moon took a deep breath. Her voice was icy cold. Remember, you must protect the Palace Master and obtain the Jade Soul Ice Heart, even if you must die. Yes, Elder. Chapter 566. The Great Chu territory was located in the southernmost part of the land of divinity and demons. The climate here was warm and humid, suitable for all living things to grow. The official road was paved with endless fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. There were farmers in the fields. They stood up and looked at the army leading the way. Even though they knew these were extraordinary figures, they still bowed, not much awe in their eyes. As the only super empire in the world, this was the confidence of the Great Chu citizens. As long as they didn't make any mistakes, they didn't need to fear anyone. Qin Yu rode atop his horse, wearing the armor of a true demon guard. He restrained his aura and mixed in with the guards, appearing unremarkable at all. As his eyes fell on the calm and steady faces of the farmers, he sighed inwardly. The confidence of the leader of the Seven Empires could be seen here. Traveling on the official road was the Demonic Path's delegation to congratulate Ing capital. They would open a transmission array from the Holy Land's small world until they were 10,000 miles away from the capital region. For the final 10,000 miles, even the revered Immortal Path and Demonic Path had to walk one step at a time in order to show their respect to the Great Chu. This was a rule that had been set since the founding of the Great Chu Empire, and no exceptions had been made for anyone. The 300 true demon guards rode horses, surrounding and protecting several luxurious and exquisite carriages. The black, gold and blue and purple colors were extremely eye-catching. In formal diplomatic occasions, all sorts of flying carriages that swept through the world had lost their dignified aura. The leader of the Demonic Path's congratulatory delegation was an old man with a long beard. He wore a wide black robe and his eyes were filled with an imposing aura. This person was surnamed Qin and he had an extremely high status within the Demonic Path. But because he didn't care about worldly affairs for many years, he had already faded from the public's eyes. But now, everyone in the delegation, including the two Calamity Immortal deputy envoys, were extremely respectful towards him, so no one else dared to be insolent. To have the qualifications to be in charge of the diplomatic mission to the Great Chu Empire was enough to prove that this elder Qin hadn't lost any of his influence even though he had been silent for so many years. However, this elder Qin was extremely cold and aloof. He didn't show any respect to anyone. From the moment the delegation arrived until now, he had only told them that no one was to disturb them and hadn't taken half a step out of the carriage. Qin Yu looked up at the eye-catching carriage and felt a bit helpless. Was this person arranged by the demon envoy reliable or not? Forget it, I hope that everything goes smoothly. It would be best if Elder Qin doesn't have to make an appearance. Otherwise, things will definitely get out of hand. As he lowered his head and looked away, what Qin Yu didn't know was that within the carriage, Elder Qin had slowly opened his eyes. Through the gaps in the thick curtains, his eyes fell on him. Elder Qin frowned and sighed. The son of a noble family should not sit in the hall, much less the dignified holy son of the Demonic Path. This was simply preposterous. But, thinking of what the demon envoy had said, the Holy Son's choice today was one of helplessness. Thinking of this, Elder Chen's frown deepened. Was there no one who had not thought of such a simple principle? The demonic path had been peaceful for a long time, and the people's hearts were becoming increasingly lax. If they couldn't deal with this properly, there would likely be a great upheaval in the future. Ing City was known as the world's most majestic city, so one could well imagine the scale of the city. One could already see the continuous outline of the city from a distance of 3,000 miles away. Even though it was blurry and indistinct, the dignified and heavy atmosphere still assaulted one's senses. Just a glance at it would make one feel suffocated. The great Chu army that was leading the way stopped. The general in charge turned his horse around and came to the side of the carriage. "Honorable envoy, we're about to enter the territory of Ing City. Your entourage will be temporarily settled in the barracks." Elder Chen's calm voice echoed out from the carriage. "Of course." After a brief pause, a deputy envoy led 300 true demon guards and some of the accompanying demonic path cultivators to stay behind. They watched as the carriages left under the protection of the great Chu army. "Lord Deputy Envoy, please follow us." The great Chu army cultivator that was left behind led the group down the official road. After walking for another hour, they entered a barracks. The barracks were clean and tidy, and some courtyards had been built to accommodate the guests. The demonic path cultivators were placed in the southeast corner of the barracks, facing the sun and the wind. The great Chu army cultivator left after instructing everyone not to casually go out and ask questions in advance. The deputy envoy that was left behind had a calm expression. He swept his eyes over the group of people and lightly said, "Remember, the only thing that matters in this world is strength. The great Chu Empire has a status equal to the immortal realm and the demonic path, thus we have to abide by their rules. You can be dissatisfied, but you can only hide it in your hearts. Whoever causes trouble will have to bear the consequences." Everyone's hearts chilled. They hurriedly cupped their hands together and nodded. The deputy envoy waved his hand for everyone to disperse. Then, his eyes fell on the several true demon guards that were leaving. He frowned and revealed a thoughtful expression. Even now, he didn't know just who these people were. The Great Chu Empire's 30-million-year anniversary celebration would open the Sea of Purgatory. The quota for the diplomatic mission had become extremely precious, and the 300 true demon guards were the escorts. They had the highest quota and the lowest status, so it was much easier to manipulate them. During this period of time, countless people had tossed out favors in order to send their children or nephews into the list. To be able to quietly take 7 spots, one could imagine just how tyrannical the strength of the person behind them was. But what was puzzling was that as the deputy envoy, he hadn't received any notice at all. Either the background of these 7 people was so great that they could completely ignore him, or they had another mission. The deputy envoy's heart chilled. He suppressed his tumbling thoughts. His intuition told him that it was best not to continue paying attention to this matter. Qin Yu discovered that the eyes on him had already moved away. He felt a bit more at ease. Anyone that could be arranged to be the deputy envoy was truly a smart person. He and the 6 people around him had been arranged here. Although they could hide it from others, they couldn't hide it from the main characters of the diplomatic mission. If the deputy envoy was too curious, it would be troublesome. Now was the best situation. All he needed to do was quietly wait. The #1 empire in the world was worthy of the demonic path, treating it with the utmost respect. Over the endless years, they had planted countless eyes and ears. Disregarding the deaths and injuries, they finally had an accurate information channel. After the 30-million-year anniversary celebration, the Sea of Purgatory would inevitably open. After entering the courtyard, Qin Yu turned and said, "The 6 of you can rest. Before the Sea of Purgatory opens, I will not leave." The 6 true demon guards respectfully nodded. But only 3 returned to their rooms, 2 stayed in the courtyard, and 1 hid in the shadows. Qin Yu knew that the mission they received was to ensure their own safety. He thought about it and didn't say anything else. He nodded to the two people in the courtyard and left. Although they were second-class guests that weren't valued too highly and didn't even have the qualifications to enter the capital to participate in the grand celebration, the Great Chu Empire's reception wasn't negligent. Every day, all sorts of delicious food and wine were served. In order to prevent the guests from being bored and causing trouble, there were also many lively programs. The solemn and cold military camp had suddenly transformed into a place where entertainment, food, and entertainment were all gathered together. The courtyard was bustling with activity every day. But no matter how lively it was outside, besides the daily food and drinks being delivered, the gates to Chinyu's courtyard never opened even once. In Yuya's opinion, the people living in this courtyard were a group of strange people. Their auras were icy cold and they spoke pitifully few words. Moreover, the way they looked at people was strange, like sharp knives. As Yuya thought about all sorts of rumors about demonic path cultivators, she was extremely nervous. Luckily, although the people living in the courtyard were cold, they didn't make things difficult for her. As time passed, she slowly calmed down and her eyes weren't as cautious as they were at the start. She even dared to look around. On the sixth day, Yuya pushed open the door and saw the seventh person. She couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. She had always thought that there were only 6 people living in this courtyard. She didn't know whether it was an illusion or not, but as her eyes fell on the 7th person, the atmosphere in the courtyard suddenly froze. Yuya was at a loss for what to do, and her face instantly paled. The 7th person said, "The food is very good." With these words, the surrounding oppressive pressure suddenly vanished. Yuya gasped for breath, not daring to speak. She hurriedly laid down the food box, bowed, and left. That night, Yuya had a horrifying nightmare. She felt as if she were drowning as she fell into endless darkness. Just as she was struggling to no avail and despair rose in her heart, a voice sounded out in her ears. "It's fine." The darkness receded like a tide. Yuya's eyes shot open. Her nightgown clung to her body, soaked in a cold sweat from her sleep. In the courtyard, Chinyu looked at the true demon guard standing in the darkness. He lightly said, "It's just an unimportant person. There's no need to be so cautious." He didn't know who this person was, but he didn't like his actions tonight. But, thinking that this person was someone arranged by the demon envoy and also in order to ensure his own safety, he didn't say anything. The true demon guard seemed a bit surprised. He looked at Chinyu for a moment and then cupped his hands across his chest. "It won't happen again." Chinyu nodded. He turned and returned to his room. He took a deep breath and calmed the nervousness in his heart. The demonic path's holy palace's saint's son, this identity was enough to attract all sorts of attention. Once he was exposed, it would inevitably lead to unpredictable consequences. Originally, Chinyu had comforted himself that the demon envoy's arrangements were extremely appropriate and that his journey here had been smooth. There shouldn't be any accidents. But the actions of the true demon guard reminded him once more that while he had come to the capital while concealing his identity, there were actually tremendous dangers hidden within. The demonic path was already strong enough. Even if one disregarded their mortal enemy, the immortal sect, there were still countless people that didn't want to see the holy palace smoothly produce a new holy lord. For instance, the great Chu royal family. He bitterly smiled. It was only now that Chinyu was able to determine that he had been nervous in his heart, so he had cautiously stayed in the courtyard without taking a single step out. Then, why had he suddenly had a sudden impulse to push open the door and enter the courtyard during the day? Now that he thought about it, Chinyu still had no clue. Towards this, although the true demon guard and the others didn't say anything, Chinyu was well aware that they would likely complain in their hearts. He shook his head and suppressed the tumbling restlessness in his heart. His eyes became firm once more. It was impossible for him to wait. He didn't know how long it would take for the channel to the demon world to be repaired. The water demon and the sea of purgatory was the key to him becoming a holy lord, so the risks were completely worth it. Qin Yu sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes, continuing to perceive the inheritance of the holy palace. This was a great supernatural ability of the demonic path that could be used in conjunction with the demon body. Although its might was average, it was still very helpful to cultivating the demon body. Ever since he obtained the stone tablet inheritance, Qin Yu had been meditating on it. Not long ago, he had finally managed to peek into the gate and feel the subtle transformations of his mortal body. Although the key to becoming a saint-step demon body was the calamity immortal realm demon blood, not everyone who obtained demon blood would be able to smoothly make a breakthrough to the emperor's step. There was also a certain chance of success, and the stronger the demon body and the deeper the foundation, the higher the chances of success would be. Even though his cultivation of water had stagnated because he was perceiving the inheritance of the holy palace, Qin Yu didn't hesitate at all. Becoming a saint-step demon body and inheriting the throne of the Holy Lord was the most important matter right now. For the next several days, Yuya didn't see the seventh person living in the courtyard again. But, the more she did this, the more she couldn't forget the words she heard in her dreams. That voice was particularly clear. It had to be him. But, why would this person's voice appear in her dreams? Yuya thought about it for a long time. Then, she changed her story and told her little sisters around her. As a result, she was mercilessly laughed at by them, saying that she was just budding in love. The young women responsible for taking care of the guests in the barracks were all transferred from the great imperial plantations surrounding capital. Their backgrounds couldn't be considered noble, and this assignment was a chance for them to fly up the branches. If they could enter the congratulatory procession, even if they didn't have the qualifications to enter in capital, their backgrounds were still extraordinary. If they could climb up to them, they could change their destiny. Although they would have to leave their homes in the future, to the women of the imperial plantations, their destinies weren't in their control. Rather than not knowing where they would be sent in the future, they might as well take a gamble. Because of this, there was a great deal of flirtatious news spreading out from the barracks. Some of the guests were beaming with joy. It was clear that they were having a great time. Yuya's face flushed red. But, how could she clearly explain this sort of thing? She argued for a bit and then shut her mouth. She regretted saying this earlier. If she knew this would happen, she wouldn't have said anything. When the group of sisters dispersed, a cousin who was not close to Yuya called out to her, who was about to leave. Her expression was very solemn. I hope what you said is true and that you didn't have any thoughts that you shouldn't have. Although it's good to climb up the social ladder, you must remember that you and I are from the imperial plantations of the Chu country. Even if we successfully leave with someone, can we really be trusted? In a woman's life, she only has one chance to make a choice. Don't regret it. Yuya knew that her cousin was speaking from the bottom of her heart. Before coming to the barracks, her parents had already told her something similar. She said gratefully, "Thank you for reminding me, cousin. I will remember it. I won't make a mistake." Her cousin's expression softened. She nodded and left. Unexpectedly discovering that her distant cousin cared about her, Yuya's mood improved for 2 days. She didn't want to delve too deeply into the matter of the voice in her dreams. He was a demonic cultivator and would soon leave the Chu country. No matter what the reason was, she would let it go. But when she warned Yuya's cousin, she encountered trouble. In the courtyard she was in charge of, a guest had taken a fancy to her. She had tried to probe her a few times, but her cousin had dodged all of them. Although the guest was unhappy, he didn't want to cause trouble. The matter should have been over, but today, the guest was having a banquet in the courtyard. Perhaps he had drunk too much wine and reverted to his old ways. No one knew what had happened, but in the end, he made a big fuss. When Yuya heard the news and rushed over, her cousin was lying on the ground. The corner of her mouth was broken, and her face was pale. In the courtyard, a man in his 30s sat boldly. He had a sinister look on his face. "Smelly whore. I gave you face, but you didn't want it. You actually dared to splash wine on me. Did you not know who I am? Today, I'll give you a chance. Call all the people you can call. If they can't suppress me, you can stay here tonight." Yuya trembled in fear. Most of the people in the imperial plantations came from sinners and were considered exiles. They didn't have much status in the Chu country. If they offended a guest, no matter what the reason was, it would be a big mistake. Thinking of her cousin's warning, Yuya bit her lip, turned around, and quickly left. She found the steward responsible for this matter, but the other party's attitude was ambiguous. He only said that it wasn't good to meddle in this matter. She found someone to contact her family. After asking around, she found out that the guest her cousin was in charge of was actually a relative of the Chu country's royal family. Although they were only a side branch, they were still considered masters. How could these palace stewards dare to meddle in this matter? They were afraid that things would turn out badly for them. In their eyes, this was only a lowly sinner from the imperial plantations. Moreover, that young master had said that he wouldn't harm her life, so this was even less of a problem. Yuya's family quickly sent a letter telling her not to meddle in this matter, otherwise even she might be implicated. As Yuya thought of her cousin lying on the ground with all the blood draining from her face, she felt extremely sad. But, what could she do? As she panicked, a thought suddenly popped up in her mind. Yuya felt as if she had gone insane. But if she didn't try harder, her cousin's life would be ruined. That person, would he be willing to help? In his room, Qin was meditating. In his mind, there was a giant with the sun, moon, and stars above its head. Its feet stepped on mountains, rivers, and seas, and it ran forwards. Every step it took caused the stars to tremble and the earth to collapse. Suddenly, the giant roared and came to a stop. The stars above its head and the earth beneath its feet rapidly vanished from sight. Chapter 567. When Yuya knocked on the courtyard door, her palms were full of cold sweat. When she saw the cold eyes of the true demon guard armor, her body instantly froze. Thinking of her cousin's situation, she suppressed her fear and explained the purpose of her visit while trembling with fear. Her pale face was full of pleading. Unfortunately, it was useless. The true demon armor remained unmoved. "Get out of here." He tried to close the door. Yuya didn't know where the courage came from, but she blocked it and begged, "My lords, I beg you, please save my cousin." True Devil Guard Armor's eyes became deep and serene, and a bone-chilling aura emanated from his body. A calm voice suddenly came from behind him. "Let her in." The true demon guard paused for a moment before turning around and retreating to the side. Yuya's eyes lit up. She didn't know why, but when she heard this voice, she suddenly felt a sense of peace in her heart, as if all the difficulties were about to disappear. Quickly entering the courtyard, Yuya saw the figure that she had only seen once, but had left a deep impression on her. With a thud, she knelt down. "My lord, please save me." The doors opened one after another. Besides the hidden true demon guard, the other 5 people gathered. Although they didn't speak, Qin could feel the dissatisfaction in their eyes. As a dignified demonic path holy son, he had hidden his identity within the maelstrom. No matter how careful he was, he couldn't be too careful. Yet, he felt compassion for a mere maid. It was truly disappointing. Looking at the pitiful Yuya who was lying on the ground with tears in her eyes, the few of them sighed in their hearts. Even if he was in love with women, he still had to know when. The atmosphere in the courtyard was heavy. Qin bitterly smiled to himself, unable to explain himself. He looked at Yuya kneeling on the ground. This was the first time he had seen her on a whim, and today was the second time. If this was just a coincidence, it would be too much of a coincidence. His thoughts raced. When he looked up, he had already made a decision. Someone go with this young lady and finish this matter. True Demon Wei Jia frowned and said in a low voice, "My lord, we are just guests. Isn't it inappropriate to interfere in this matter?" This was the first time he had said so many words, so the meaning behind his words was obvious. Although the other 4 true devil guards did not speak, the dissatisfaction in their eyes became more and more intense. Qin Yu waved his hand. "Do as I say." Since he couldn't explain, he might as well not say a word. With his status, even if he was the demon attendant's subordinate, he couldn't disobey. Sure enough, the true demon guard fell silent for a few breaths of time before bowing in agreement. "Miss Yuya, please lead the way." Yuya looked over with gratitude, but now was not the time to delay. She got up and hurriedly left with the true devil guard. The other 4 true demon guards indifferently cupped their hands together towards Qin Yu and left. In this world, seeing once was better than hearing 100 times. Was this the holy sun that everyone in the demonic path recognized? For a moment, they all felt a little regretful for accepting this mission. Qin Yu could feel the indifference and alienation in their attitudes. He rubbed his nose and bitterly smiled. However, he quickly suppressed his emotions and calmly waited for the next development of the matter. He just didn't know what was so special about this girl from the Chu kingdom that he didn't know. Qin Yu wasn't worried about true demon guard armor appearing. Although the people living in this military camp were all second-class guests that didn't have the qualifications to enter in capital, they were still divided into various ranks. Demonic path cultivators were undoubtedly the most outstanding existences. As long as one had a brain, they wouldn't fall out with the demonic path because of something like this. However, there were some twists and turns in the matter. Qin Yu had somewhat underestimated the pride of the Great Chu imperial clan. Even though they were just an inconspicuous side branch of the Great Chu imperial clan, they were in a military camp in the capital region of the Great Chu. This gave them the confidence to toss and turn. So what if they were from the demonic path? Did they think they would be afraid? True demon guard armor didn't explain the details, but the final result was that this relative of the Great Chu imperial clan lowered his head. It was just that it was a bit unpleasant. Because of this, Qin Yu could clearly feel the increasingly dissatisfied attitudes of the true demon guards around him. Because she was worried that they would retaliate, Yuya and her unconscious cousin temporarily stayed in Qin Yu's courtyard. However, this could also be considered an explanation to the outside world. Many people suddenly realized that Yuya had climbed up a high branch. No wonder she could make a demonic path cultivator act. The deputy envoy sent someone to ask them several questions and warned them not to meddle in their affairs. But he didn't continue to pursue the matter. Things should have passed like this, but he never imagined that on that very night, the guest that was related to the Great Chu imperial clan would suddenly die in his courtyard. When news of this spread out, the atmosphere in the military camp suddenly became thought-provoking. If a Blue Sea Realm Master didn't have an old disease or illness, how could he suddenly die? The demonic path that had just come into conflict with this guest was naturally the greatest suspect. But as long as one had a brain, they would know that even if the demonic path was dissatisfied, they still wouldn't immediately kill someone after the conflict. This was a very simple reason. But no matter what, if this person died, the demonic path would have to bear some trouble. True demon guard armor had a dignified expression. Someone is deliberately targeting us. His eyes revealed worry. When they came to the Great Chu, they had already promised the Lord Demon Envoy that they wouldn't allow anything to happen to the Saint's son. If there really was an accident, they feared that they would have no other choice but to atone for their sins with death. We have always been careful, so how could we have been targeted? Before True Demon Guard Armor finished speaking, his complexion darkened. Yesterday, Guard Armor had appeared to protect that pair of sisters, and then someone had immediately died. Although he wasn't sure whether or not it was because of this, there was no doubt that it was the source of the storm. Wei Yi hatefully said, "The saint's son is too soft-hearted. Could it be that he doesn't know that his life and death is a great responsibility for the demonic path?" What a disappointment. Guard Armor frowned. Shut up. Just what sort of status does His Highness have? How can you and I speak nonsense about him? If this really arouses suspicion, then even if yesterday's events didn't happen, they would still think of other methods. Be vigilant for the next few days. If there is an accident, activate the backup plan. The demon envoy certainly wouldn't. He only arranged a single path. If things went smoothly, then everything would be fine, but if something happened, then they would have to protect Qin Yu's life first. Of course, once this backup plan was activated, there was no guarantee that Qin Yu would survive. But there would inevitably be a massive number of spies that the demonic path had planted in the Chu Empire that would lose their lives. The discussion ended in silence. The 6 true demon guards all had heavy hearts. They didn't know how many people had died, but they didn't care, because once something happened, they would all die. The vice envoy personally came to the courtyard and gathered Qin Yu's group of 7. His eyes were cold and sharp. Was this matter done by you? What he worried about the most was that these youths with extraordinary backgrounds wouldn't know the immensity of the heavens and earth. If they killed someone, then things would truly become troublesome. Although the one who died was an unremarkable relative of the Great Chu royal family, in the end the bloodline of the Great Chu royal family flowed through his body. Moreover, at this critical juncture, this matter could be big or small. Wei Yi cupped his hands together. Lord Vice Envoy, rest assured that this matter has nothing to do with us. The Vice Envoy ignored him. His eyes fell on Qin Yu. He could naturally see who was the true leader of this group. Qin Yu was silent for a moment. He said, "It truly has nothing to do with us." The Vice Envoy let out a long breath. "It better be as you say." He hesitated for a moment and said, "I don't know why, but this matter has been reported to the Great Chu Palace. Originally, it was only a minor matter, but the 30 million year celebration is just around the corner and the person who died was related to the Great Chu royal family. Now, it has stirred up a considerable storm. If there isn't anything important, don't go out for the next few days." He didn't stay any longer. He turned and left. As long as it wasn't the demonic path that did it, then no matter how tough the Great Chu royal family was, they couldn't do anything to them. His last few words of warning were only a favor. Yuya hid behind the door and clearly heard the conversation in the courtyard. Her face was filled with guilt. She hesitated again and again before pushing open the door. She walked forwards and bowed. "This is all my cousins and my fault. We have implicated everyone here." She didn't know what to say. The people in front of her were all demonic path cultivators. Their status, and strength were all far above hers. Even if she wanted to repay them, there was nothing she could do. Qin Yu shook his head. "Although the vice envoy is solemn, this matter wasn't done by us, so it cannot be blamed on us. Miss, there is no need to worry too much." Wei Jia and the others drew back. First, with Qin Yu's status, they didn't know what he was talking about with this woman, so it was naturally inappropriate for them to stay and listen. Second, when they heard that this matter had reached in capital and that someone was adding fuel to the fire from behind, they became even more worried and didn't have the mood to continue staying. Yuya was moved to tears. This is all thanks to my lord. If it weren't for you, my cousin's life would have been ruined. Us sisters have nothing to repay you with. We can only thank my lord in our hearts and pray for you for the rest of our lives." Chin-yu smiled. "Miss, you speak too seriously." His tone was indifferent. He didn't ask for anything in return for helping her. He only wanted to understand just what sort of connection there was between this woman and that sudden tide rush of blood. Unfortunately, he still had no clue. As Chin-yu was considering whether or not he should say a few probing words, Yuya's face flushed red in this brief moment of silence. They weren't family or friends, yet he had helped them without hesitation just because he had served them for several days. Yuya wasn't a child. She naturally knew that this reason wasn't sufficient. Could it be? Could it be? She carefully looked up and glanced at Chin-yu. Although she couldn't see his appearance, she could see that he was tall and straight and had a calm demeanor. For him to be the leader of this group, it was clear that his background wasn't ordinary. If it was really as she thought, then what should she do? As she was panicking, the door behind her opened once more. Her cousin's pale face appeared. She had already woken up last night and had seen Chin-yu once. As her eyes fell on Yuya, her cousin could naturally guess what she was thinking. She couldn't help but bitterly smile. Although she didn't know the true identity of this armored Chin-yu, she knew that he didn't have the least bit of feelings for Yuya. Afraid that Yuya would say something she shouldn't and cause herself to be embarrassed, her cousin coughed and squeezed out a smile. "Cousin, the Lord rescues us without asking for anything in return, but you and I can't do nothing. I heard that in your early years you obtained a strange seed and have always regarded it as a treasure. How about you take it out to express your sincerity?" Yuya revealed an uncomfortable expression. She didn't speak for a moment. Chin-yu thought that she didn't want to part with it. He said, "How could I accept something that Miss Yuya loves so much?" "To Mrs., there is no need to be so polite. Just rest and recover in peace." He cupped his hands together and turned to leave. Yuya loudly said, "No. I am willing to give it to the Lord." Her face flushed red. She hurriedly reached around her neck and took off an exquisitely woven necklace. The pendant was wrapped around the seed. Although Yuya's movements were fast, Chin-yu could still clearly see that the necklace was hidden beneath her clothes. The pendant had clearly fallen on her chest. No wonder she had hesitated. Chin-yu's expression stiffened. Luckily, he had the mask so no one could see him. He was about to wave his hand in refusal when his eyes fell on the pendant and his heart began to race. Intuition told Chin-yu that the reason he had two sudden inspirations was because of this pendant. Like this, he couldn't bring himself to refuse. He looked at the necklace that was passed to him and Yuya, whose head was nearly touching her chest. Chin-yu hesitated for a moment and said, "It looks quite exquisite. I will take it and give it to the women in my family so they can learn how to weave it." The reason he said this was so that the atmosphere wouldn't be too awkward. Otherwise, if a man like him were to take something from a girl's chest and carry it around with him, how would she feel? The necklace was still warm in his hand. He could even smell the light fragrance of a girl's body. How could Chin-yu stay here any longer? He cupped his hands together and left. Yuya looked at his back. As she thought about the women Chin-yu mentioned just now, her heart was thrown into chaos and her shyness was reduced by half. Her cousin sighed. She held on to her sister's hand and said in a soft voice, "Big sister is several years older than you, so my eyesight might be better. Although I don't know the identity of this lord, I can imagine that he must be extremely noble. Little sister, you should give up on such thoughts lest you feel even more sad in the future." Yuya revealed a flustered expression, like a little animal whose secret had been discovered. Looking at her cousin's pitiful expression, she bit her lips and nodded. After returning to his room, Chin-yu placed the necklace in front of him. After sensing it for a long time, he lifted his hand and opened the package around the pendant, revealing a gray object inside. It was cold to the touch and gray without any patterns. If he hadn't heard them say that this was a seed, Chinyu feared he would have treated it as a common-looking stone. After thinking for a moment, he sent out his divine sense and wrapped it around the seed. But no matter how he probed it, he couldn't sense any life from it. Was it really a seed? Chinyu frowned. After a moment of hesitation, he flicked his sleeves and took out the 9th province furnace, using its strength to cut off the void. In the next moment, Chinyu closed his eyes and his mind flew far into the distance. Soon, the space in the room trembled and a part of it collapsed inwards. The projection of a great sun appeared in the dark nothingness. But today, this great sun projection was even dimmer and its volume had shrunk by several times. Chinyu opened his eyes, an apologetic look on his face. I know that I shouldn't have summoned you here, but there is something I need your help with. I have no choice but to take this risk. He didn't want to delay. He spread out his hand and revealed the seed. Help me determine just what this is. An invisible strength swept up the seed and it fell into the great sun projection. It took much longer than Chinyu imagined before the seed was sent back. The great sun projection became much dimmer, as if it had consumed a great deal of its strength. A thought fluctuation came from the little blue lamp. This is indeed a seed. It needs to be in a place where extreme yin and extreme yang meet in order to hatch. Before it finished speaking, the collapsing void collapsed and the sun projection faded away. Chinyu's heart skipped a beat. He turned his hand and put away the seed as well as the 9th province furnace. Just as he finished doing this, his body froze. Panic and fear surged out from the depths of his soul. It was like a divine God was looking down on the earth from the highest heavens. Luckily, this feeling came quickly and left just as quickly, disappearing without a trace. Chinyu didn't dare to be careless. After waiting for a long time and seeing nothing strange, he frowned and his thoughts raced. If there was someone that could sense the existence of the little blue lamp, then that person must be an existence that stood at the peak of the world. In the Great Chu's capital region, less than 2,000 miles away from Ing City, there was only one person, the Great Chu Emperor, Mi Ganyuan. He had reigned for 170,000 years and held great authority within and outside the Great Chu Empire. His pressure was unrivaled. Would he be discovered? Chinyu's heart chilled. After carefully thinking for a long time and determining that he hadn't revealed any flaws just now, he calmed down a little. Although the aura just now was terrifying, it was extremely ethereal. If it weren't for the cosmic Seacross bell, Chinyu didn't think he would have been able to sense it. If the Great Chu Emperor had only swept out with his divine sense, he might not have noticed him. Chapter 568. In Capital, Imperial Palace. The Great Chu Emperor summoned all the assistant ministers to discuss the details of the grand celebration that would take place in 2 days. This involved the face of the empire, so no one dared to make any mistakes. They each made their own suggestions, striving for perfection. Suddenly, sitting on the throne, Mi Ganyuan closed his eyes. The third assistant minister's complexion changed and he fell silent. Everyone else in the hall also revealed looks of surprise. The 4 assistant ministers were all senior figures of the court and had a deep understanding of the emperor. If it weren't for some extraordinary matter, then the emperor who had always been generous to his subjects would never be so disrespectful. What was going on? The 4 assistant ministers' thoughts raced. They looked over their bodies and didn't find anything wrong. Only then did they quietly relax. The emperor had reigned for 170,000 years. He had no authority over his subjects nor did he have any worries from the outside world. Although he was usually tolerant of his subjects, deep in his bones he had a tyrannical personality. He was proud and callous. The 4 assistant ministers had been in court for the shortest period of time and had over 40,000 years of experience. It was unknown how many grand figures they had seen die at the hands of the emperor, so how could they dare to be careless? The hall was silent. In just several breaths of time, the eunuchs in the corners of the hall were covered in a cold sweat. But they could only grit their teeth, not daring to make a single sound. Luckily, it wasn't too long before Mi Ganyuan opened his eyes. His eyes were like an ancient well without ripples. Although they seemed ordinary, if one looked carefully, they would discover that they were unfathomably deep like vortexes, as if they could contain the entire world. The corners of his lips curved up. This great Chu emperor, one of the most honored people in the world, revealed an inscrutable smile, as if he had discovered something interesting. The assistant minister had been with the great Chu emperor for over 100,000 years and was the most respected minister in the court. He thought for a moment and then respectfully said, "Your Majesty, what happened?" The second assistant minister, third assistant minister, and fourth assistant minister all had a bit of envy in their eyes. Only the assistant minister could ask such a question, they didn't have the face to do so. Mi Ganyuan swept his eyes around the hall. He paused for a moment and said, "I had a sudden feeling just now and my divine sense descended upon the capital region. I discovered 2 interesting little fellows." He sighed, "I really can't imagine why the immortal and demonic paths would allow them to take such risks." His eyes were deep and serene, like the endless starry sky that could drown a person's mind. Since the emperor mentioned it, that meant there was something to be said. As the cabinet minister heard the words immortal and demonic path and then saw the deep emotions in His Majesty's eyes, he had some guesses in his heart. "Your Majesty, could it be that the immortal and demonic path envoys have hidden their identities?" Mi Ganyuan lightly said, "If my guess isn't wrong, then one of the demonic path envoys should be the newly ascended Holy Sun Yaobin. As for the immortal sect envoys, that should be the new master of 9 Heaven Mirror Moon Palace, Shin Yuanyin." Although the 4 assistant ministers were mentally prepared, they still couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice. They couldn't care less about their manners as they suddenly raised their heads. Their eyes were filled with shock and a bit of coldness. The great Chu stood proudly in the world. It was the leader of the 7 empires. If it weren't for the immortal and demonic paths holding it back, it would have long since unified the world. Therefore, although they appeared to be peaceful on the surface, among the ministers of Great Chu, not a single one of them did not view the immortals and devils as a great threat. Now, a newly ascended Holy Sun and a trusted palace master were in Capital's capital region, they couldn't help but think about it. If these 2 people died, it would be an incomparably heavy blow to the immortal Tao and demonic Tao. "Your Majesty, this is an opportunity bestowed by the heavens. As long as everything is arranged properly, there will be no hidden dangers left behind," the third minister said, his voice thick with killing intent. The fourth minister wanted to agree, but as he glanced at the silent second minister, his eyes flashed and he tightly shut his mouth. Mi Ganyuan didn't respond. He said, "Yuan Qing, what do you think?" Yuan Qing was the courtesy name of the first minister. Even so, his tone was still respectful, without the slightest bit of complacency. "Your Majesty, I believe this is inappropriate." The third minister frowned. Mi Ganyuan said, "Tell me the reason." The first minister thought for a moment and slowly said, "Reporting to Your Majesty, although I don't know why the demonic path's Holy Sun and immortal sect's palace master have come to my great Chu, since they have come, the immortal and demonic paths must have made other arrangements. Unless they openly mobilize a massive number of masters, the chances of them being killed are extremely low. Although my great Chu is strong, the immortal sect and demonic path cannot be underestimated. If this matter is not handled properly, it will cause a great uproar." The third minister sighed inwardly. He knew that the first minister was right. It was no wonder that the second minister was acting like a turtle without saying a word. He wanted to challenge the second minister's position, but he didn't dare to be presumptuous in front of the first minister. He immediately said, "Your Majesty, what the first minister says is correct. It was I who didn't think things through. But, if those two came to my Great Chew, they must have some unknown goal. Can my Great Chew just tolerate this?" The first minister smiled, not speaking. The second minister coughed and bowed. "Your Majesty, the Sea of Purgatory will soon open. This might be an opportunity." The third minister coveted the position of second minister. Unfortunately, the second minister had an honest temperament, so the first minister was very satisfied with him. Mi Ganyuan could see all of the intrigue between the officials, but he didn't place it in his heart. Only when his officials were at odds with each other would he be able to sit firmly in power. Dong Qing is right. He looked up. This simple movement revealed the bearing of a king, as if he could look down upon the world. I and my Great Chew dare to face any enemy. So what if it is the immortal sect or demonic path? The reason I didn't kill them was because I didn't want to use underhanded methods. Since the two of them came without notice, if I don't teach them a lesson, they will become increasingly arrogant and think that my Great Chew has no one worthy. Yuan Qing, pass on my decree. The Sea of Purgatory's seal has been completely opened. Whether they obtain a great stroke of good fortune or are buried within, that will depend on their own fate. The first minister respectfully said, "Your Majesty, if the Sea of Purgatory seal is completely opened, the degree of danger will rise by over 10 times. What will my juniors do?" He frowned, revealing a bit of helplessness. His Majesty controlled the world, so naturally he could do as he pleased. But, although he was the first minister, he didn't dare to form grudges with anyone. He could only ask His Majesty to decide on this matter. Mi Ganyuan coldly coughed. The world has endless tribulations, who doesn't fall into them? If they don't experience tribulations, how can they have any achievements? To be able to gain experience with the most outstanding juniors of the immortal sect and demonic path is their good fortune. His icy cold eyes swept through the whole. Do not reveal a single word about the seal. In addition, pass on my decree that all cultivators that enter the Sea of Purgatory will obtain the qualifications to meet the Emperor. The four ministers felt their hearts tighten, but they didn't dare to reveal anything on their faces. They all fell to their knees, praising His Majesty for his wisdom. After discussing for some time, the matter was temporarily finalized. The four ministers bowed and drew back. After leaving the imperial palace, the third minister was the most restless. He said with a sound transmission, "Lord First Minister, what should we do? Do you think we will send our juniors to their deaths even though we know that there are dangers everywhere?" The first minister said without expression, "His Majesty has already passed down his decree. I advise my 3 colleagues not to do anything. If we delay His Majesty's matters, a great calamity will befall us." As he spoke, he strode away. The second minister apologized and quickly followed, leaving behind the third and fourth ministers. The third minister clenched his teeth. I don't believe that they will risk the lives of their juniors. The fourth minister hesitated for a moment. There is no need to be angry. The Lord First Minister is right. It is best if you don't touch His Majesty's decree. However, since His Majesty has informed us of this matter, that means he has a gracious heart. You can remove some of the juniors that have already been arranged, or you can replace them with others. The third minister's eyes brightened. The messenger is right. Time is of the essence, so I bid my farewells. The fourth minister looked at the receding figure and revealed a bit of contempt. Such a stupid person could actually become an assistant minister. All he did was take advantage of a good background. If it weren't for him attracting spies, the fourth minister wouldn't have cared about his life or death. But how was he supposed to do it? The fourth minister thought for several breaths of time. Then, his eyes brightened and he smiled. Wasn't the Lord First Minister the best example? He would just do as he was told. The third minister sat in his carriage. As the curtain fell, all of the anxiety and anger on his face disappeared. His eyes were calm and indifferent, without the least bit of waves. Demonic Path Saint Son. Immortal Sect Palace Master. He whispered, revealing a happy expression. I never thought that there would be such an unexpected harvest this time. A light smell of blood filled the air. Shen Yuanyin furrowed her eyebrows. A dignified look appeared in her indifferent eyes. That aura just now, although it was fleeting, her heart was like a frozen lake. She had still sensed it. After thinking for a long time, Shen Yuanyin let out a light breath. Whether or not she had been discovered, she had already lost her path of retreat. In this world, the only great terror was death. This was also the only emotion she had after reaching large success of the Sublime Lost Emotion Code. Shen Yuanyin didn't want to die. She also believed that she wouldn't die like this. The Chu Empire held a grand banquet to entertain guests from all over. Depending on their status, the banquet was different. The main hall had 13 seats. Those that were entertained were the peak influences of the land of divinity and demons. The Immortal Path, Demonic Path, and the 6 great empires were all included. The banquet was naturally the best. There was a cup of immortal god wine that was rumored to originate from ancient ruins. The wine contained a boundless world strength that could directly increase a cultivator's cultivation. Wuma Sijan originally had the qualifications to enjoy a cup of immortal god wine. He was filled with anticipation, but he never imagined that before the banquet began, he would be ordered to leave in capital to deal with the death of the great Chu imperial family's in-laws. Wuma Sijan knew much more about Elder Qin, who didn't reveal his emotions. Although he was unwilling, he still smiled and agreed. After he left the imperial palace, his face was so gloomy that it seemed as if it would drip water. The one he hated the most was naturally Elder Qin. But unless he wanted to seek death, he could only suppress his anger in his heart. Thus, his anger doubled and fell onto the several true demon guards that had provoked him. The evil flames of Wuma Sijan's anger burned. After leaving in capital, he headed straight for the capital region army camp. He vowed in his heart that he would make these bastards pay a painful price. After several years of seclusion, a holy sun had suddenly appeared, stealing away all of his glory. Wuma Sijan was already depressed. This diplomatic mission to the Great Chu involved another lucky chance for him, but before it even began, he had already suffered a loss. That cup of immortal god wine was his turning point to break through a small boundary. If everything went smoothly, his chances of success would increase by 20%, there was no need to say anything more. If it weren't for this, with Wuma Sijan's shrewdness, he wouldn't have been so angry. When they arrived at the army camp, the deputy envoy had been notified ahead of time and was already waiting outside. As he saw Wuma Sijan's pale complexion, his heart trembled. Although he was the deputy envoy and his status in the diplomatic mission was only inferior to Elder Qin in name, he was well aware that there were some people he absolutely could not provoke. Wuma Sijan was absolutely one of them. Chapter 569. The vice envoy had been humiliated in front of everyone. He stiffened and nodded, but he wasn't happy at all. Instead, he sneered with a bit more anticipation. The several people in the courtyard clearly had extraordinary backgrounds. If they were to argue with Wuma Sijan, things would become lively. A group of people arrived in front of the courtyard. Just as the vice envoy was about to send someone to knock on the door, Wuma Sijan sneered and kicked the courtyard door open. In the courtyard, Wei Jia slowly stood up. He swept his eyes over the crowd, his icy cold eyes deep and serene. Wei Yi and the others walked out. Wuma Sijan was expressionless. Lord Vice Envoy, have all the people living in this courtyard arrived? The Vice Envoy shook his head. There are 2 more. Wuma Sijan sneered. I am here on the orders of Elder Qin to investigate this matter. Call everyone out. In the shadows, Wei Ding appeared. He was the smallest and thinnest of the 6 people. His light gray eyes didn't have the least bit of brilliance in them. There was still one person missing. Wuma Sijan was enraged. How insolent! He swept his eyes over Wei Jia and the others, thinking in his heart. Since these people were part of the diplomatic mission, they definitely knew who he was. If they could remain so calm, it was clear they had something to rely on. But the more this was the case, the angrier Wuma Sijan became. In terms of background, cultivation, and methods, he stood at the top of the younger generation of the demonic path. Besides His Highness the Saint's son, who could compare with him in the entire demonic path? Since you haven't come out, then you must be the one in charge. I am here on orders to investigate this matter. I want to see who dares to stop me. Wuma Sijan waved his hand. 2 cultivators behind him stepped forwards. Wei Jia lifted his hand. Those who haven't come out are not feeling well and cannot be disturbed. If my lord wishes to ask anything, please look for us. How could Wuma Sijan be willing to listen? As his 2 subordinates saw Wei Jia blocking the way, they sneered and thrust out their hands. They followed beside Wuma Sijan in preparation to assist him once they entered the Sea of Purgatory. These 2 people were quite strong. Although it seemed like a simple clap, the truth was that their strength was completely restrained. The moment they touched each other, they erupted with astonishing killing power. Bang, bang, in a spark, 2 loud explosions sounded out at the same time. The ground beneath Wei Jia's feet instantly shattered and everything below his ankles sank into the ground. The 2 cultivators who attacked were sent flying. Their bones cracked and their arms were twisted like fried dough twists. They landed heavily on the ground. They were in so much pain that their faces were pale, and their foreheads were covered in sweat. However, the 2 of them knew Wuma Sijan's temperament. Even if they were in great pain, they still endured it and did not let out a single groan. But now, when they looked at Wei Jia, their eyes were filled with awe. When their attack landed on Wei Jia's body, all of the power had been reflected back at them. This skill could be said to be astonishing. Wuma Sijan's expression changed slightly, and he immediately flew into a rage. He took a step forward, and his tyrannical cultivation erupted. In an instant, it was like a boulder falling into a still lake, stirring up raging waves. Wei Jia's face was expressionless as he similarly took a step forward. The expected earth-shattering collision did not occur. It was as if a torrential rain had descended from the sky to extinguish a mountain fire. In the blink of an eye, all the auras were wiped out. This move was even more shocking. It was even more unbelievable than the strength he displayed when he was on par with Wuma Sijan. The vice envoy's heart suddenly shrank. He hoped to see Wei Jia and the others humiliate Wuma Sijan and not fight him to the death. Otherwise, if something unexpected happened, he would not be able to escape the blame no matter what. Stop. This is the Great Chu's military camp. Could it be that you want to have a private battle and have others laugh at the internal strife of my demonic path? Wuma Sijan was surprised, but he didn't reveal any of this on his face. He coldly glared at Wei Jia and coldly coughed, "I will remember today's matters." He flicked his sleeves and left. He originally wanted to vent his anger, but he had to suppress it. Wuma Sijan's current mood was truly poor to the extreme. But reason told him that this was the end of the matter. He wasn't able to see through Wei Jia's depths, and Wei Yi, Wei Ding, and the others weren't easy to provoke. Moreover, there was still one more person who hadn't appeared from start to finish. It seemed that in these several short years of seclusion, the demonic path had become indistinguishable from before. Not to mention the dazzling His Highness Saint Sun, but the Zhao family's Xiao Qianyuan had also taken off. And now, there was actually another mysterious character. As Wuma Xizhan thought of this, his complexion became increasingly pale. The vice envoy bitterly smiled. He looked at Wei Jia and the others in the courtyard, his lips moving, but in the end he didn't say anything. He turned and led his people away. Originally, this was only a guess, but now he could confirm that the backgrounds of these people in the courtyard were far more astonishing than he had imagined. This ruckus might attract the attention of others, and from the actions of Wei Jia and the others, it was clear they didn't want to be noticed. If he followed them here today, he might end up being blamed. This was truly an injustice. Wei Ding looked over, a bit of worry in his gray eyes. Wei Jia waved his hand. He lightly coughed, a bit of weariness in his eyes. It's fine. As he looked at Qin Yu's door and thought about how today's events would surely be noticed by others, he couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Because of Yuya, things had finally come to this point. Would His Highness feel regret now? In truth, Qin Yu didn't regret anything. It wasn't that he didn't think about it, but that thinking about it now was useless. It was just a waste of energy. The Chu Empire's 30-million-year celebration was held as scheduled. On this day, In Capital's Great Array Formation was completely opened. The phantoms of 9 dragons descended from the heavens, each one 1,000 miles large. They circled around the city and roared. Trillions of auspicious clouds gathered, sprinkling down a golden rain. Whether it was the grand ceremony or the scale, it was one of the highest in the world. Although the second-class guests of the several military camps in the capital weren't able to enter in capital, they were still able to observe the grand and boundless momentum of the grand ceremony. Qin Yu stood in the courtyard, looking at In Capital that was covered in a dazzling divine light. His expression was calm. After the grand ceremony, the Sea of Purgatory would soon open. He hoped that everything would go smoothly. As the grand ceremony began, news spread throughout the Chu Empire. His Majesty the Emperor placed great importance on the opening of the Sea of Purgatory. As long as a cultivator entered the sea, they would obtain the qualifications to meet His Majesty. The great Chu Emperor was a character that stood high above the 9-layered heavens. Besides important ministers of the court, there were very few people that were able to see His Majesty's face. Moreover, His Majesty held him in such high regard. If there were some people who were hesitant before the opening of the Sea of Purgatory, now their eyes were shining with a sharp light. It was clear that this was a chance for them to make a name for themselves in front of His Majesty. If they could grasp this opportunity, they could soar to the heavens in the future. In particular, the 4 assistant ministers each chose their own outstanding juniors from their families. After this matter was confirmed, the spots to enter the Sea of Purgatory became even more precious. The entire In Capital was stirred up. The cabinet chief and vice chief sat across from each other. The tea on the table was already cold, but the two of them didn't have any thoughts of drinking it. They glanced at each other and bitterly smiled. The 4 cabinet chiefs had revered statuses. If it weren't for those above interfering, no one would dare to inquire about their actions. It seemed that His Majesty the Emperor had already made up his mind. He didn't hesitate to use the lives of court ministers and noble juniors to trap the demonic path Saint Sun and Mirror Moon Palace Master into a desperate situation. His Majesty the Emperor's personality is becoming increasingly callous. The vice chief lightly sighed. As he thought of his second son and 4th grandson on the list, he couldn't help but feel a bit sour in his heart. There was a bit more resentment in his voice. The cabinet chief frowned. He said in a low voice, "Dong Qing, be careful with your words. You and I come from humble backgrounds. The reason we have our current status is all because of His Majesty's grace. We cannot disappoint His grace. After a slight pause, he said, the juniors of my family are born to be outstanding people and have also received His Majesty's grace. Not to mention that the Sea of Purgatory isn't without a chance of survival, even if we take their lives, so what? As the vice chief finished speaking, he immediately regretted it. He stood up and bowed. Thank you for Brother Yuanqing's reminder. I forgot my manners. The cabinet chief waved his hand and changed the topic. I have always cared about my blood kin, but I have miscalculated in this matter. In order to consider the overall situation, His Majesty won't say too much. But after the Sea of Purgatory, he won't be able to maintain his current status. The third chief had always coveted the Sea of Purgatory, and the second chief naturally knew this. But as he heard this, he didn't feel much joy. If Xiong Hanhai dared to secretly play tricks and leave behind the truly outstanding juniors of his family, this could be considered a form of courage. At the very least, he wouldn't dare to do such a thing. Even if he lost his position as a vice chief, he could still preserve the future of his family. As for what the gains and losses were, it was hard to say. After speaking a few more words, the second chief bid his farewells. But when he appeared in front of others, he had to put on a calm and unperturbed appearance. Although those in high positions were bright and beautiful, they also had hidden pains that no one knew about. The cabinet chief drank a mouthful of cold tea. The sour taste penetrated his heart. He closed his eyes and gently sighed. Only if more people died in court and something happened to the demonic path Saint Sun and Mirror Moon Palace's master, would His Majesty be able to cleanly shirk responsibility and shut up the mouths of the immortal path and demonic path. Realizing this, he extinguished any thoughts of persuading His Majesty to change his mind. He personally selected the juniors that he valued the most and added them to the list. If the dignified direct descendant of the cabinet chief was buried in the Sea of Purgatory, who would dare to splash dirty water on His Majesty? It had to be known that His Majesty valued the cabinet chief the most. This was a matter known to the world. No matter what the result was, the cabinet chief's mansion would inevitably favor him even more. But as he thought about how this was done with the blood of his descendants, he couldn't bring himself to be happy. The cabinet chief summoned his trusted steward and ordered him to select a batch of maids from the mansion and give them to all the juniors that were about to enter the Sea of Purgatory. In order to guard against all contingencies, the juniors of noble families would be temporarily bestowed with women before they ventured into danger. Perhaps they could leave behind some of their bloodlines so that if something happened, they could have a successor. This matter wouldn't arouse any suspicions. After the steward received the order, he immediately began to make arrangements. The cabinet chief stood up. The weariness and bitterness in his eyes completely vanished, leaving behind only a light and tenacious expression. His face was filled with dignity once more. This was because he was the cabinet chief of Great Chu. Your Highness, have you really decided to enter the Sea of Purgatory? The man's voice was filled with worry. The woman remained calm. Yes. The man hesitated for several breaths of time. He cupped his hands together and said, Since your Highness has already decided, I will follow and lend your Highness a helping hand. The woman was overjoyed. That's great. With you helping me, there will definitely be some harvests in the Sea of Purgatory. A moment later, the man walked out of the hall. He looked up at the sunlight, a worried look on his face. This person was Tianyun. His original intention was to stop His Highness, but as he thought about His Highness' current situation, he couldn't bring himself to say anything. Whatever, he would just consider this as repaying His Highness for saving his life. The worst result would be that he would have to return his life to His Highness. Northeast Capital City, Military Camp, a courtyard. This was the encampment of a small country's diplomatic mission. Everyone here, including the envoy, weren't allowed to enter in capital. Their status was low and no one paid attention to them. In a room, a man and a woman sat across from each other. The man was tall and strong, with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He had a dignified appearance, and his movements were graceful and dignified. The woman across from him slightly lowered her head. But just the side of her face was enough to stir one's soul. Wei, the Sea of Purgatory is not ordinary. Big Brother only has you left. Listen to me and wait for me here. The woman shook her head, her voice calm. I only have Big Brother left. Wei. Big Brother, there is no need to say anything more. I have already made up my mind. The man frowned. After a long period of silence, he finally sighed. You must agree to follow all arrangements. Otherwise, no matter what happens, I will not let you enter the Sea of Purgatory. I will listen to Big Brother. On the 7th day after the great celebration, news spread out from the Great Chu Imperial Palace. 3 days later, His Majesty the Emperor would summon all the cultivators that entered the Sea of Purgatory and personally open the sealing array. Qin Yu and the 49 demonic path cultivators rode atop horses and finally stepped into Ing capital. As he walked out from the shadow of the towering city gates, his expression was light. But as he thought about the upcoming meeting with the Emperor, he felt a bit restless. Reality proved that Qin Yu had been a bit too sensitive. The summoning ceremony was held outside Harmony Hall in front of the Imperial Palace. Tens of thousands of people gathered there, one couldn't see the end of the crowd. The Emperor sat on the dragon throne atop the 1,000-layer platform, his aura surging around him. It was hard to clearly see his appearance. From start to finish, there wasn't the slightest bit of impropriety. As he finished speaking, the Chu Emperor stood up. His figure wasn't too great, but at this time it seemed as if he were higher than the heavens, as if he were stepping on the earth beneath his feet. The majesty of an emperor blotted out the heavens and earth, leaving one in awe. He lifted a hand and pointed a finger into the void. In the next moment, endless turbulence descended, as if a violent storm had arrived. The entire sky turned into a raging sea. Between the layers of waves, a gray entrance to the world appeared in front of everyone. Although the Sea of Purgatory was named after a sea, it wasn't a true sea. Only the word purgatory was worthy of its name. The moment the entrance opened, an invisible infernal energy surged outwards. Although it was imprisoned by Ing Capital's Great Array formation and couldn't recklessly spread out, it still caused the skies above the capital city to change color. In the blink of an eye, night fell. Chapter 570 /P. The dark sky hung low, and the clouds seemed to overlap with the mountains in the distance. Some kind of vegetation that looked like withered branches grew on the black ground, and every branch of different thickness was covered with sharp thorns. Suddenly, 7 specks of light appeared in the quiet air and rapidly expanded outwards. When the light faded, a figure could be seen in each of the specks. Qin Yu glanced around at Wei Jia and the others, feeling a bit more at ease. The demon envoy's arrangements hadn't gone wrong. With the 6 of them by his side, his safety would be greatly increased. Wei Jia took a deep breath, and a complicated expression flashed in his eyes. In the blink of an eye, he became calm again. He cupped his hands and said, "Sir, there are earth terminus thorns growing below, and they can produce hallucinogenic effects. If you feel uncomfortable, just take out the sachet and smell it a few times." Seeing Qin Yu nod, Wei gestured with his hand. Wei Bi and the others spread out to protect him. As for the elusive Wei Ding, he vanished once more. "Sir, let's go." Whoosh, the group quickly went far away. As one of the Great Chu Empire's guardian god beasts, the water demon slumbered deep within the Sea of Purgatory all year round. It was a forbidden danger zone that no one could step into. With only a month of time, he didn't know what troubles he would encounter along the way, so he naturally didn't dare to delay. Qin Yu's eyes fell on Wei Jia and then on Wei Yi and the others who had a tacit understanding of each other. Their movements were orderly, as if they were quite familiar with the Sea of Purgatory. Had he been here before? But just as this thought appeared, it was dispelled by Qin Yu. According to the demon envoy, the Sea of Purgatory had only been opened several times since the founding of the Great Chu Empire. The last time could be traced back to over 7 million years ago. How could there be a creature in this world that could live for such an endless amount of time? He was probably overthinking things. Shen Yuanin's face was covered with a veil. Her cold eyes were like crescent moons in the night sky, indifferent and distant, without the least bit of emotion. The 12 female cultivators behind her knelt on one knee. All of their figures were graceful and beautiful, but their faces were stiff, as if they were masks. Not far away, a demon beast with horns on its head and black diamond-shaped scales was cut into 13 pieces. The cuts were as smooth as a mirror. The wounds seemed to be wrapped by an invisible membrane, and not a single drop of blood flowed out, but the air was still filled with the smell of blood. The smell of blood did not come from the dead beasts, but from the 12 beautiful women kneeling on the ground. "Palace Master, it's time for us to move." Shen Yuanin nodded. Her feet lightly stepped forwards and her body floated away like a feather. The 12 female cultivators behind her slapped the ground and followed behind her like shadows. Zhang Tian lowered his head and looked at the black wound on his arm. He frowned and said in a deep voice, "Be careful, something is not right." Sensing the worried gaze from the side, he turned his head and said, "Don't worry, Wei Wei. A mere poison can't hurt me." Vivian shook her head and handed Zhang Tian an antidote. Even though it was useless, Zhang Tian still took it and swallowed it. "Is it okay now?" Several people in the group saw the young Mrs.'s worried expression. Although no one said anything, their expressions were very ugly. Although what happened just now was sudden, they were safe and sound, but the young master was injured. This was simply unforgivable. If something happened to the young master, they wouldn't be able to atone for their sins even if they died 10,000 times. All of them secretly swore in their hearts that they would definitely be 120% cautious and not make any mistakes. However, at this moment, following a cry of alarm, the team immediately fell into chaos. Wei Jia's expression was unsightly. Although he had been extremely careful along the way, he had still alarmed 4 demonic beasts, and the one in front of him was especially powerful. Although it hadn't stepped into the tribulation immortal realm, its pure destructive might wasn't weak at all. It took a great deal of effort to kill it. Although Qin Yu didn't know what this meant, he could feel the dignified expressions of the true demon guards and knew that something must have gone wrong. And indeed, Wei Jia said in a low voice, "My lord, the Sea of Purgatory's monster beasts live in different areas. Generally speaking, there shouldn't be 2 tyrannical monster beasts appearing in the periphery. I ask my lord to be more cautious. This subordinate feels that there is something strange about the Sea of Purgatory today." Qin Yu nodded. But at this time, his complexion changed. "Be careful." He stepped forwards and the ground suddenly collapsed. His figure shot up into the skies. In the next moment, the earth shattered and several black tentacles reached out. Unfortunately, the true demon guards had received Qin Yu's warning, causing them to fall into thin air. The black tentacles rapidly retracted, sweeping away the corpse of the monster beast. Then, there was the scalp-tingling sound of flesh and bone being separated. As Wei Jia saw the tentacles underground, his pupils shrank. But as he heard the sound of swallowing flesh, he stiffened. "My lord, this subordinate is holding it back. I ask my lord to quickly leave." With a loud shout, gray energy surged between Wei Jia's hands, condensing into a giant saber. He leapt down and chopped down. Bang! There was a heaven-shaking explosion. A massive crack appeared in the ground, revealing a giant and terrifying body below. The slippery surface of its body was torn apart and dark green mucus gushed out. Pained and angry roars echoed out from underground. The terrifying life form hidden underground tightened its muscles, pressing its wounds together. Soon after, there was the sound of breaking air. Several black tentacles rushed out like bolts of lightning. Wei Jia didn't resist, allowing these tentacles to pull him underground. "Your Highness, hurry and leave." Wei Yi and the others rushed underground. At some unknown time, the hidden Wei Ding had already landed in a crack in the ground, the saber in his hand sinking into his flesh and blood. Rumble rumble, like an earth dragon turning over, the earth violently shook and waves rose up. In the blink of an eye, the terrifying life form, Wei Jia, and the others were submerged. But from deep underground, muffled sounds echoed out, indicating that a fierce battle was occurring. Qin Yu frowned. After a moment of silence, he took a deep breath and was about to step forwards. But at this time, the cosmic sea-cross bell in his soul space began to hum and tremble. He looked up. In the distance, a black mountain ridge was shaking and collapsing, something was rising up from underground, and there was more than one. Qin Yu's eyes dimmed for a moment, but he immediately restrained it. He turned without hesitation and hauled away. He didn't look back. It was only when he could no longer hear the deep roars and the rumbling of the earth that he stopped. Looking back, he could see that the gray skies were filled with interweaving clouds and fog. They were like mountains that wanted to crush people to pieces. Before Qin Yu came to the Chu Empire, he had carefully researched information about the Sea of Purgatory. With his status as the Holy Palace's saint's son, he had access to nearly the highest levels of information, so he knew a great deal about the Sea of Purgatory. Wei Jia and the others were tyrannical to the extreme, but not too long after entering the Sea of Purgatory, they had encountered a calamity. Although this place was dangerous, it absolutely couldn't reach today's degree. For a time, Qin Yu didn't think that it was because his and Shen Yuanin's identities had been exposed that the Chu Empire's great emperor wanted to kill them, leading to the current situation. As he thought about how Wei Jia and the others had likely perished, Qin Yu felt a bit of bitterness in his chest. Although he hadn't known them for a long time, these people had wholeheartedly protected him. Even though they knew there was a slim chance of survival, they hadn't hesitated at all. However, these emotions tumbled for a moment before he suppressed them. Wei Jia and the others had used their lives as the price to allow him to escape unscathed. Only by living on would he be able to repay them. Now, Qin Yu had two choices in front of him. One was to quickly retreat and leave the Sea of Purgatory. This place was strange and filled with great dangers. This was the best way to preserve his life. The second was to continue deeper. But as he thought about how the periphery was already so dangerous, who knew how terrifying the Forbidden Zone would be? This choice, but before Qin Yu could think this through, a deep roar sounded out from behind him. He turned around to see several people rapidly fleeing as well as a giant figure chasing after them. This was a half-rotten corpse. Beneath its tattered clothes was a large expanse of dark purple flesh and blood, and one could clearly see the bones within. It held a giant machete in its hand. The machete had been broken in half, and the cut was blood red. Looking at it, one could see that the blood had already congealed. But the feeling it gave off was that it was still flowing and full of vitality. At this time, Qin Yu's first thought was that he didn't know what sort of life form could leave behind such blood. Then, from the depths of his heart, he began to tremble. Although they hadn't fought yet, he could tell just from its aura that this corpse was absolutely terrifying. "Fellow Daoist ahead, save me!" Shouts sounded out from behind him. Qin Yu turned and ran. Even if he wanted to leave now, there was no way out. But soon, his complexion darkened. The several people behind him chased closely behind him, but the corpse was getting closer and closer. Ah! There was a pitiful scream. A woman was grabbed by the corpse, her face draining of blood. Save me! Brother Thunder, save me! Unfortunately, the several people in front didn't even turn around. They only cared about running for their lives. The corpse's hands suddenly tore the woman in half. As it ran, it took great bites. But there was a hole in the corpse's stomach, and the flesh and blood it swallowed fell into its stomach before falling out. When someone turned around and saw this, they were scared out of their wits. They screamed and ran even faster. Qin Yu suddenly turned around. He could clearly hear the flesh and bones in his legs creaking. But in the next moment, an even more ferocious strength burst forth. The power of an emperor's step demon body was revealed at this moment. Lei Fong stubbornly stared at Qin Yu. The demonic path's true demon guards all had powerful mortal bodies. If he could make them bleed, then his powerful and delicious blood energy would definitely draw this corpse away. His eyes turned cold. He lifted a hand and punched forwards. Qin Yu's complexion changed and an icy coldness appeared in his eyes. He flicked his sleeves, scattering the incoming strength. Then, he turned and coldly glared at Lei Fong. He stepped forwards, propelling himself forwards. At the same time, the strength that he had smashed into the earth erupted after a short period of preparation. Lei Fong and the others just happened to pass through this area. The sudden explosion submerged them, causing their speed to inevitably drop. Suddenly, a stone flew out, smashing into the chest of one of the men. He tumbled to the ground and crawled up, wanting to continue running. But at this time, a cold and hard palm had already grabbed onto his ankle. Ah! A desperate howl sounded out once more. Lei Fong's face was covered in dust and he was in a distressed state. In that instant, he could clearly feel a bone-chilling aura wrapping around his body. In that moment of life or death, Lei Fong had kicked the stone away to strike down Cui Sanqing. Only then was he able to avoid disaster. He had nearly fallen into the hands of the corpse. Lei Fong was panic-stricken. He looked at Qin Yu's back, his eyes filled with even more hatred. That bastard! He had completely forgotten that he was the one who harbored evil intentions in the first place. Moreover, there were several people that had been chasing after Qin Yu, trying to divert the disaster onto him. After killing 2 people, the corpse's desire to hunt seemed to be satisfied. The roars of the corpse gradually quieted down and the cold Yin aura that shrouded everyone dissipated. A moment later, Lei Fong turned his head and saw that the corpse had already disappeared. He let out a long breath of relief, a look of joy on his face as he subconsciously slowed down. Looking forwards, Qin Yu's figure had already gone far away. All that remained was a black dot that vanished from sight after several breaths of time. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.